Chairman, we're now live streaming. Handing over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first virtual scrutiny meeting today on the 16th of July. Without any further ado, I am aware that Councillor Burt would like to raise a point of order at the start of the meeting. Councillor Burt.
Chairman, could I draw your attention, please, to Schedule 12 of the Local Government Act, Part 1, Paragraph 4. I am very concerned that we're having a meeting and none of the reports have been disclosed. After 5 months, there's not been a single written report, absolutely nothing in 5 months. Now, these, according to that part of legislation, I believe these reports should have been disclosed 5 clear days before this meeting, because it's impossible to prepare for this meeting if we don't know what we're actually going to be talking about. And just having an item on the agenda, a number on the agenda, doesn't cut it. So please, could I have some sort of a legal view on this as to whether the meeting is actually properly constituted? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Maxine, are you happy to pick this point up?
Thank you, Chairman. The meeting is legally compliant. There is no requirement for any papers. It's all subject to what's been required by the Commission. And I think what was asked for was a presentation on various areas of the COVID-19 pandemic. Certainly, if there is papers that particularly are required, we can certainly send them to any members if you request them. But today we were asked to come and do a presentation, which is what we're planning to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxine. I will stress, Councillor Burt, that when I sent out the email a couple of weeks ago about this meeting and what was intended to be on the agenda, I did invite all members to make their views known if they had any concerns, and also to add any further agenda items if they wished to. And I don't recall receiving an email from you. So I think we're going to proceed for the meeting. I'll allow you one comeback and then we really must crack on.
I don't actually think you sent me that email. And in any case, I don't, you know, if the meeting was saying that there were going to be reports, I expect those reports to actually be there so that I can prepare for the meeting. They haven't turned up.
I think Maxine's covered that point, but you certainly did get an email from me. Anyway, well, then you'll need to speak to IT because I certainly emailed you. Minutes of the meeting from the 6th of February was a little while ago. I'm aware of one member who'd like to raise one point on the minutes, but obviously if anyone else has points, please indicate and I will try to spot you. Councillor Martin, you've already emailed me about your point, so we'll start with you and I'm looking for hands.
Thank you, Chairman. It's not so much to challenge the minutes, it's more raising an issue as to what our role actually is as a point of order in that sense. In the minutes, it does seem like an awful long time ago when we met in February, 116/20, the Corporate Plan Refresh 2020. A number of us made some suggestions which seemed to be taken on board at the time. And one of them particularly, which I raised at the beginning, was that the paper highlighted that the new strapline for the corporate plan was your place, your health, your opportunity, your council, rather than the previous our council. You may remember I raised at the point that I welcomed this. There didn't appear to be any dissension in the room. I did flippantly suggest it might be a typo, but that appeared to be discounted. When the list of changes, or draft list of changes for the corporate plan was circulated, it had reverted to our council. Now, I have particular issues with that, but this is the process I'm talking about rather than the subject. And then when the paper went, and I raised it with the executive member who said it was a typo and it would be changed. However, when the paper then went to the council, it had reverted again and actually doubled down on the original version by having to explain that your place, public facing, your health, public facing, your opportunity, public facing, our council, internal. When we get to a stage where we have to start explaining our strap lines, it does suggest maybe that the strap line is not actually as effective as it might be. My question then to you, Chairman, is how do we, if we believe in the midst of asking questions and raising points about papers and presentations that are brought to the Commission, how do we record a point that we believe is important so that it's actually taken account of, or at least recorded that we've made it, when it then proceeds on to either the council or the cabinet? I recall at that meeting we had what was turned into, definitely turned into a motion from Councillor Atterwell on live streaming, and look where we are now. And we debated that, and we debated an amendment against with it, and we voted on it, and it was recorded. Is that the way that we should actually be? My question is, when we receive presentations or reports that are going to go on to cabinet or to the council, how do we make our representations part of that process rather than being used as a rather gentle talking shop and then the executive move on?
Thank you, Councillor. So the problem you've described, I think, was a failure of the bureaucracy. It clearly was something that was recommended by Scrutiny, albeit not formally by resolution that it be your council. As you mentioned, the cabinet member themselves also welcomed the change, and it was meant to be your council, and then subsequently it reverted back to our council again. I don't want to diminish the point, because the point, of course, is minor in terms of a wider strategy of a council. It is your underlying point of, if we're making points and recommendations as the Scrutiny Commission, how do we ensure they're followed through? I am reluctant to end up having to resolve formally for every single point we make. Obviously, if that becomes the case, then that's the sort of action that we will take as a Scrutiny Commission, but I'm sure that the executive members on here and the leader of the council is on here as well will take note of your point, and that the people that take the minutes, the democratic services officers who assist the minute taker and so on, will ensure that our points are properly carried through in future so that these slip-ups don't happen. But I think as a commission, we will all need to keep a close eye on the matter. And if this happens again, then maybe we have to review how we formalise our recommendations. I'm happy if any of the cabinet members would like to speak on that particular matter, because it is one that goes to the heart of the relationship between the Commission and the executive. Otherwise, we'll move on. Seeing none. Okay, thank you.
Chairman, I'm happy to respond as leader if it would be pertinent.
Thank you, Sam. That would be great.
Thanks, Chairman. So, yeah, Councillor Martin's points are acutely correct. And if the bureaucracy got in the way from the recommendations of the Commission in relation to the corporate plan, I apologise for that. Just to give some reassurance, Chairman, that post-COVID, the Council will look and feel differently. And in turn, we are refreshing the corporate plan. It won't be ready, I'm sure, by your next meeting, but in draft form, I would welcome some thoughts and feelings from the Commission when it is in its draft form and iterations for the final 3 years of this Council's mandate. In relation to the relationship between the Commission and the executive, as the Chairman has quite rightly pointed out on several occasions, it's your role to hold us to account and in any format. And I hope that the Commission will continue to either make recommendations to Cabinet or Council or resolutions And I think you're probably quite right, Chairman, that we just need to follow up and tighten up on some of those communications and channels just to make sure that any of those are picked up post those meetings. And I would implore, Chairman, that to invite the relevant executive member or cabinet member to attend so they can hear loud and clear the views of the Commission when they are debated, and they can take them away and action them accordingly if appropriate to do so. But thank you very much, Councillor Martin, for his comments, and Chairman, for the opportunity for us to be here today.
Thank you. I will actually just cover a broader point at this point then. I note obviously Councillor Burt's point of order at the beginning of meeting. I also now note Councillor Clark's correspondence with me last month demanding that a scrutiny meeting was called. I don't want this commission to be something that's used as a political football or something that's going to be used to sort of exert pressure through political ends rather than to actually do its job, which is to scrutinise the executive. Obviously, Councillor Burt, you're entitled to raise your point of order with your concerns around the papers, as you've already discussed. Obviously, Councillor Clark was entitled to write to the press directly to say he was calling on me to call a scrutiny meeting, but it would be an awful lot easier just if people were to contact informally. People can telephone, people can email, and I'm sure a lot of these problems could be resolved without us having to be quite as formalistic about how we're doing. I'm very happy if we want to continue to use formalistic methods to try and get people's points across, but I think if we're all going to be working as a collegiate body, and I think up until now we've done quite a good job of doing that, then it would help the dynamic if people were, at least at first instance, to try and get changes that they wanted to be having happen through a less formal route. And that's all I'll say on that. Are there any other points on the minutes? I'm seeing no indications. So could I have a proposer, please, to accept the minutes? That's Linda Turner, and a seconder, please. That's Hilary Bushell. Can I see anyone who, given how difficult it is to see everyone at once, is there anyone who objects to us passing the minutes? I see.
Sorry,
Councillor Jeremy,
Chairman.
you're objecting, is that correct?
No, Chairman, my hand's been up for a while.
Sorry, I scrolled across and found your hand up after I said, is anyone objecting?
That's okay, I can jump up and down next time if you like.
Very good.
I just wanted to comment on your statement there, because it's very important, in my opinion, when we have a cabinet system of governance, that there are sufficient checks and balances. And scrutiny is a really important role on that. Yes, it is political, but it shouldn't be party political. We have a role of scrutinising the council for the benefit of Brecon residents, regardless of politics. You've given us a fair challenge, in my opinion, which is for commission members to request agenda items. And I think that is a fair challenge, and I've certainly taken note of that. And in that spirit, you know, I'm happy to sort of suggest things in the future, but I don't want to diminish the role of scrutiny in holding the cabinet to account, because for many of us, it's our only opportunity to do so.
Absolutely agree with you, Terry. And if I might say so, I welcome any councillors who want to formally bring a call in on particular cabinet items. That is members' rights, and there are sufficient members so to do. Obviously, we also have the standing items and various items that come through sort of joint consent with the executive, because they think it would be something that they would usefully have scrutinised by us. But I would really welcome all members making suggestions for the agenda. And up until the coronavirus, we did actually have quite a full work plan, albeit a lot of that has fallen into abeyance given the circumstances we now find ourselves in. Okay, so that was unanimous. The minutes are now passed, so that's good news. That's the longest we've ever spent on that item. Julie, would you be able to give me apologies and substitutes for item 2?
Chairman, we have no apologies and no substitutes.
Thank you very much. Obviously, at this meeting, we have also got a number of non-commission members, both cabinet members and other members, and you are, of course, if you indicate, welcome to speak on any item, and I will will gladly hear your contributions. Item 3 then is Chairman's announcements. I have none. Item 4 is items of urgent business. I have not been made aware of any items of urgent business. Are there any items of urgent business that I should be aware of? Seeing none, excellent. Item 5, declarations of interest. Do any members have declarations of interest that they should be disclosing? I don't see any indication. Oh, I see an indication. Councillor Eagle.
Yes, thank you. For my business through Breckland Council.
Sorry, could you, I don't know if everyone else heard that. I lost you halfway through. Could you just repeat that, please?
Breckland Council for my business.
Did everyone get that? Sorry, one more time, Fabian. Or maybe again.
I think he's gone. Back again.
There you are.
Now? Hello.
Yes.
Yes, I received a discretionary grant from Breckland Council for my business.
Thank you. Are there any other indications? I'm seeing none. Good, thank you. So thank you for those.
Chairman.
Sorry?
Councillor Martin.
Oh yes, Councillor Martin.
Apologies, Chairman. Yes, same declaration that our holiday home business received the grant from the Breckland Council during the COVID crisis.
Thank you very much, Councillor Martin.
And Councillor Jeremy.
And Councillor Jeremy.
Sorry, Chairman, perhaps it would be better if we had some guidance on whether or not we do indeed need to declare that, because I suspect there'll be a number of people that that's relevant to.
Maxine, I think it probably does count as a pecuniary interest, but Maxine, do you have a strong view, or simply prudent for members to declare this interest?
Or I can find my unmute. It would just be prudent for you to declare it. I don't think it's definitely necessary, but you would need to make that decision yourself, bearing in mind how you received the grant.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. On that basis, in a similar vein, I shall declare that I received one too.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jeremy. Any more for any more?
And Councillor Coleman.
Councillor Coleman.
Yeah, in that vein as well, my fiance's family business received a grant as well. So.
Thank you very much. Any last takers? Seeing none. Thank you. So that was item 5. Item 6 is non-members wishing to address the meeting. I'm not aware of any non-members or public speakers that wish to address the meeting outside of the items that we already have scheduled. So we'll move on to item 7. Just before we start item 7, we have a very lengthy set of presentation. Well, sorry, I don't want to make it sound that long. We have a very thorough set of presentations from the council to cover multiple aspects of the council's response to the coronavirus pandemic. I've asked that they break it down into discrete sections to allow members to properly focus their questioning at each item. So we'll start with item 7, but please bear in mind that items 7 through to 11 are all presentations in relation to the council's response to the coronavirus pandemic and different aspects thereof. Without any further ado, I will invite the Executive Director of Place and the Executive Director of Strategy and Governments to do item 7, and then we shall ask questions. Would you also please make clear whether you'll accept questions during the presentation or you would like them all at the end?
It would be a preference to have them at the end, but if there is a burning question, happy to take that. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, please proceed.
Teresa, can you share the screen?
Yeah, I am.
Max, have you...
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chairman and Commission. Thank you for asking us to come along today to present to you with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic council response. Firstly, you're going to hear from myself and Rob Walker. We have been the lead chief officers for the response, and then we're going to hand over to some of our team to talk through some of the areas that they've been responsible for. So today the Commission should expect to hear a presentation on the initial response, the performance of the council, an update on commercial assets, an HR update, and finally we'll talk through the operational recovery to date. Firstly, we've gone on to the first slide already.
Sorry.
That's okay. Firstly, we'd like to start with some thanks. This is the first time that we've publicly been able to say thank you for the tremendous effort of everybody. So our thanks go to the members of the council, the staff, our senior team, who have all had to adapt to new ways of engaging with each other and our residents. It's been a real team effort and we wouldn't have been able to do it alone. We are really proud of what we've all achieved under difficult, unprecedented circumstances. This has been by far one of the most challenging times of our professional careers, and we're really proud of everyone who's helped, supported us and our residents through this pandemic. But obviously we wouldn't have been able to do this alone, and it's not over yet. So we wouldn't have been able to manage this response as well if we hadn't have had support from our communities, our volunteers, our partners across Norfolk and our excellent members and officers of the council. So from myself and Rob, we just wanted to say a really big thank you. I'm now going to hand over to Rob, who is going to explain a little bit more about the Breckland response. Next slide, Julie.
Thanks, Max.
Sorry. Oh.
Oh, back on Julie, please.
Oh. Gee.
Okay, good morning, members. Good to see so many of you, and thank you, Max. So I wanted to start with looking at the impact of the COVID pandemic locally. This table's been produced, and it's regularly produced by our senior policy officer, and is based on publicly available data. I'm conscious this is just numbers, and the story and the impact of COVID-19 is far more than just numbers, but I think it usually gives you a scale and breadth of the impact that we felt locally. It's quite clear that Norfolk's fared better and has been hit less hard than other places within the country. That said, as you can see from these numbers, it has experienced significant impact. If you look at Breckland's position compared to the other Norfolk authorities, we've had 430 confirmed infections within Breckland, and sadly, we've had 89 deaths recorded with the Office of National Statistics. I think it's clear to see from the table, and I think it's been clear in reporting that's been prevalent for a month or so, the west of the county has been hit harder than the centre and east of Norfolk. So I think it's clear from those numbers that it shows the west has been hit hardest, and I think that has a knock-on consequence for Breckland, which is towards the west of the county. I'm not a public health specialist, I'm not an epidemiologist. I think there's much analysis and much interrogation of the data, both locally and nationwide and beyond that, to understand why things have happened in particular ways. So I'm not going to speculate on why the numbers look the way they do. That said, I still thought it'd be useful to see the data and understand the level of impact within Breckland and more widely within Norfolk. Thanks, Julie. If you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so some of you may have seen this already, and apologies, it's more numbers. I'm not going to go into any great detail because much of the detail will follow in subsequent presentations, but I thought it'd be a good opportunity to provide an overview and a summary of what's occurred and what has happened by the council and in the district. I think it's important to point out that in any emergency, but particularly an emergency like this, we have one single clear priority, and that's to protect life. That is the overwhelming objective of our response to any emergency situation like this. And that dictated our response in the early stages. Our principal thoughts were about protecting the lives of our colleagues, our members, anyone linked to our organisation, and more widely, our residents within Breckland, and that dictated all that we did within the early days of the pandemic. I think Max and I feel that one of our greatest achievements in this pandemic is how we were able to work remotely very quickly, get our colleagues and members working from home in a safe and secure environment, and therefore limit the impact of the virus on our colleagues, but also the amount of work we've done through our communities and businesses to support to minimise the impact that they feel as well. I obviously, you know, in the blue column to the left are what we call the key critical services that a council runs. They're what we call BAU, business as usual, and the day job. We're delighted that we managed to keep all critical services running during the pandemic. We might have run them differently. They're not all running the same way, but we've kept them all running. And I think that's a great achievement. Now, as we come out of the response phase and head slightly towards recovery, we're obviously going to scale back up some of those services to levels that you would expect pre-COVID and in a normal situation. But the way that we deliver things, as the leader testified earlier, is things might change. We've learned stuff over the last 4 months, and behaviours have also changed. So how we deliver things and the way that our residents expect us to deliver services may well change. At the start of in the early days of our response to the pandemic, the government was particularly focused on two clear outcomes, one around communities and the other around businesses. They asked us to focus on two areas: to support the vulnerable and the shielded by ensuring that food and medical supplies were readily available and provided. I'm sure the numbers there show that that was achieved. And secondly, to support businesses with the distribution of business rate supports and grants. And as we've already seen earlier on the agenda, that was prevalent across the district and elsewhere. More detail on that will follow in the performance slides that follow. Julie, if you could go to the next slide, please. I'll start talking and hopefully it comes. So, as Max said earlier, we've had a local management team in place for the duration of our response phase for the last 4 months, and that will continue into the recovery phase. We still have our shared arrangements with South Holland at a senior level, at senior management level, but our response to the emergency was to create 2 local teams to best respond to those emergencies, both in Lincolnshire and in Norfolk, and those remain in place, although regular contact and sharing and support is provided across the management team. Max and myself have provided leadership in terms of goal responsibilities to that senior management team, and we've been strongly supported by 12 of our senior colleagues throughout those first few months. As Max said, it's been both challenging and stimulating and been professionally rewarding, but also difficult to work through. And we are very thankful to our colleagues who supported us on that. There's been a close relationship between Gold and the leader, deputy leader, and the executive of the council. So there's oversight on decisions that have been taken at pace during those response phases. We've not worked in a portfolio arrangement or worked in a directorate arrangement. We've had a cell-based structure that's been in place during the response phase, and the cells are listed in front of you. These remain in place to this date and provide the focus for our work or structure to our work. So we're not currently working in a portfolio model or a directorate model. We're working through those cells. The presentations today, as has been discussed earlier, focus on certain areas. At the Commission's request, they don't cover all elements of the service. So I'll just take this opportunity briefly to mention a few broader points. Members will be aware that the committee suite is currently being refurbished and improvements have been made to the committee suite as part of the Work Smart 2020 programme. We've taken the opportunity, whilst the building and the committee suite's been empty, to make sure that work goes ahead with least impact. Some of you may have visited, but I'm sure very few of you have actually visited Elizabeth House or Breckland House since March, but I can reassure you that safety measures are being put in place, both in public access areas, but right across, right around the building, to make sure that when we do go back into work within the building, that it is safe to do so. That ranges from perspex screens in reception to one-way systems to stickering to restrictions on what desks can be used to cleaning materials and a whole host of other things that mean that the building will be safe and is safe when it is used. That said, we're continuing to work remotely where possible. The number of officers working from Elizabeth House at the moment and Breckland House is less than 20 per day at the moment, to give you an indication that the vast majority of your officer cadre is working remotely at this time. Our front desk is open, but it's open on an appointment basis only. So if people are in crisis or need urgent help, they can seek face-to-face inquiries and get a response from officers in that way. That's after a triage process is run through our customer services team and our relevant professional officers. And we're finding that with good triage process and a good level of engagement from our staff, the number of appointments that are needed are very low. We're undertaking a full review of the financial impact of the authority. As you can imagine, there's been a significant impact on costs and income over the last 4 months, and a full review being led by Ali Chubbuck and the finance team is underway. And I'm sure this will be shared, well, this will be shared in due course when that work has been completed. We're here today in a virtual committee, and we've now got a full cycle of virtual committee meetings underway. We tested it with Chairman's panel in the early days, and now pleased that we've had Cabinet, Planning Committee, Scrutiny, and working towards Council, and a full committee cycle meeting virtually moving ahead. The most recent change is the news that our leisure centres will be reopening towards the end of July. This will be a phased approach in line with government guidance, and we'll start with the gyms and the fitness suites before moving on to the sports halls and pools in due course. And they're clearly following government guidance as they open up their leisure centres. We now find ourselves where we've come out of the immediate response phase and we're heading into what we call recovery. So the focus is changing slightly, and we're preparing to bring some of our services back online and reintroduce some of our usual approaches. Admittedly, though, some things will be done differently. That said, we're always prepared because we don't know what the future holds, and we're always prepared that we can revert to the response phase should it be needed at any point in the future. As officers, through our recovery documents and sharing with the executive, we're using the phrase "build back stronger" when we're describing our recovery process. That's not because we didn't think we were strong before, it's just we think we can take on the learning and the development and the changes that have happened over the last 4 months to make improvements in the way we do things and the services we provide. That's a quick overview from Max and myself, Chairman. I appreciate it's a high-level introduction, and some of the detail will follow in subsequent presentations, but Max and I are happy to take any questions from the Commission if they have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Max. Are there any questions on this stage of the presentation? I am looking for indications. I've got Councillor Clark and Councillor Jeremy. Councillor Clark, if you kick off, and I'll just keep looking for any other indications.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question, and I'm happy for this to be added to later in writing as we proceed, and obviously as things unravel in the pandemic. Rob's touched on all the work that everybody's done, which obviously seems excellent, so we thank everybody. I'm shielding, so I'm not able to go out and about and see what's actually happening out there, but I've had good reports so far. It's obviously taking been a financial hit for us in some areas in providing support. I've seen, obviously, like other colleagues, the report of last year's financial report and an overspend up to 31st of March. And my question is around how far any of the shortfall that we've had to encounter is going to be supported by central government, or when the final bill comes in, and what we may be expecting or what we still hope to ask for. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, if I may. Clearly, we're just at the end of Q1, so we have the actual figures for April, May and June to look at. The finance team are currently analysing those Q1 figures to understand what the impact is. As you'll appreciate, when we started, there were lots of ifs, buts and maybes and lots of contingencies because we didn't know how this was going to play out. So Ali and the finance team are looking at the Q1 figures to see what the real impact has been in Q1. Clearly, we've had grants from government, well over £1.5 million as a contribution towards the impact that we feel locally. So that's been factored into our financial figure, but also we're modelling loss of income on things like planning fee income, building control fee income and such like, but also some of the costs in some of the areas where there've been high demand, for example, housing the rough sleepers as we were instructed by government. So there are increased costs and increased and reduced income. There are also areas where we're spending less than we would do in normal circumstances. For example, travel and expenditure is vastly reduced on what it would be usually for the authorities. So there are some areas where the pressures are less than they would be normally. But in the short answer to your question is that work's underway. It's not ready to be shared. Once it is ready to be shared, it will come through the appropriate member arenas. Thank you.
Thank you. I take the thumbs up as satisfied, Councillor Clark and Councillor Jeremy.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a couple of points. I'll do them all so I don't have to mute and unmute and stuff. The first one, Rob, is around the grants. I think is as we could. I think there were problems with the distribution of the grants, but not problems due to Breckland. I think it's really unfortunate that the government was so quick to announce the grants being available without giving clear instructions to councils on how to distribute them, who's eligible, that sort of thing, which added to the uncertainty. I just wonder if that was sort of your view, Robin, if that's been communicated back. It might be potentially for the leader through the LGA to do that. But I certainly found as somebody that was advising businesses or encouraging businesses to apply, that it was very problematic, certainly in the earlier few weeks. That's the first point. The other one is around mental health, and I get that Breckland is not a public health body, but certainly there's been significant issues locally with impact on people's mental health through the crisis, and that's continued recently with the compulsory introduction of face masks, which is, yes, to some it's an encouragement, but to others it actually increases sort of anxiety. So I just wonder if there's a role for Breckland to support mental health services, or whether we're sort of aware of that. And on a similar vein, are we checking with our sort of key delivery partners where they stand? I'm thinking particularly of organisations like the Citizens Advice, who are no doubt going to be inundated over the next few months. I'd imagine we've liaised with our key partners, Serco, Parkwood. Are we undertaking a review of where other partners are at? And then lastly, will there be a piece of work to quantify the benefits or opportunities, if you like, that have emerged over the last few months? You've spoken about savings from transport, but there are numerous other benefits. A big one for me is around openness and accountability. And I note that, for example, the planning committee this week has had over 1,000 views on Facebook, which read into that what you like. It depends what was on the agenda, I suppose. But in terms of people being to engage with democracy, that's significantly improved, in my opinion, with the introduction of live stream meetings. So is there an opportunity there to quantify some of the wider benefits? Thank you.
Okay, I'll try my best to work through those for Councillor Jeremy. In terms of the first one, we deliberately took an approach on the grant scheme to be slightly slower off, or more methodical off the mark than some of our colleagues, to make sure we had as much certainty as possible in those early days. It meant for the first few days that I was in the unfortunate position as an officer that our performance was slightly slower than some others. But what quickly materialised over the course was actually that methodical approach of the early days, taking a bit more time, meant that in the long run, our performance was strong in terms of the grant distribution. With all of these things, it was happening quickly. The guidance wasn't always the clearest, but I think there's an understanding there that things needed to happen at pace, and we didn't always have the certainty that we would have liked, so we made the best that we could. I mean, in terms of the performance of the grants, I'm pleased that we've got 89% of those first phase grants out the door. If people want to understand why the remaining 11% hasn't gone on, not everybody wanted to take a grant. Some people declined the grants, or it wasn't relevant to them. But also within that 11% is all the national chains. Now, the national chains were eligible for grants in each local authority area. It would have caused some state aid issues if they'd have accepted those grants in each areas. So they declined to take up the grants. So it appears as though 11% wasn't taken, but that's not through lack of effort on Breckland's part, it's due to circumstance. But yeah, we took a methodical approach, Terry, to try and deal with some of the uncertainty, and that seemed to work. On the second point, in terms of mental health, yes, completely support the immediate focus was on the impact of the virus, but actually there will be long-standing impacts as we move out of that immediate phase. I think we were fortunate in this council, and you as councillors signed off the vulnerability programme in February. I think it was absolutely apt timing. We weren't to know what was about to happen, but clearly what the pandemic's shown is the need to support those most vulnerable within our community. And having talked to the leader and to the executive, they're keen that we use that vulnerability programme to support our most isolated residents, those struggling with mental health issues. So absolutely, we'll be repurposing and refocusing that vulnerability programme with what we've learned over the last 3 months to pick up the very issues that you talk about. In terms of delivery partners, I'm going to be honest, we've focused on our key ones. We haven't done everyone, but we started conversations with the likes of DWP and such like, who aren't necessarily our contractors and are more partners, to understand what the impact on the universal credit job seekers situation is and such like. I can't give you the assurance we've been to all of our partners, but that process has started, and absolutely, we're looking to pull together. We've been using in the response phase a dashboard looking at organisational performance. Now we're producing a dashboard that looks at the impact on the district, about jobs, about vulnerability, and a whole range of things. And that will necessarily include information from our partners, so we can understand what the impact on Breckland, the place, has been, as well as the organisation. And then the last piece, benefits and opportunities, and also challenges as well. Absolutely, as part of a recovery programme, and Jason Cole will talk about it later in the presentations, there are clearly opportunities and benefits that have come out of this. I think personally, on the chairman's panel for the planning committee, for example, I've seen benefits come out of that, doing that virtually. In terms of how our customers use our service in our front desk, there's been clear benefits in the structure and order that we've been able to bring that. So there are clear benefits. They will come out of the cells and the work that the cells doing as they reintroduce these services. And I think rather than one piece that sums up all the benefits, it'll be on a case-by-case basis as it's relevant, and we'll bring to members opportunities to talk about how we do things differently and how things might have changed from what they used to. But that is all likely to be on a service and a case-by-case basis rather than overarching. Thank you.
That good for you, Terry? Great, thank you. Are there any other questions on this part of the report? I haven't seen any. There we are. Councillor Morton, then Councillor Nairn, and then Councillor Martin, and then Councillor Turner. And keep waving your hand if I haven't said your name. Carry on, Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm glad we are in a learning process, and I appreciate all the effort that's gone into that. My concern is looking forward to the winter, when in all probability we might get a second wave, and I think one of the most vulnerable areas has been the care homes, and I wonder if there's anything Rob can do to sort of reassure me that if it does happen to come across into Breckland in a more severe way, we're going to be prepared to help those care homes.
Yeah, clearly we have no direct responsibility for the care homes as a local authority, so I think we need to bear that in mind. The impact on Breckland, I know I showed you the numbers earlier, probably reflects the number of care homes that were in the district, and particularly to the north of our district as well. The care homes issue will be picked up through the Norfolk Resilience Forum, through the strategic command group that runs that group, and it's clearly a focus for them with the public health team to see what support they can provide for the care homes. So I know that support was ongoing through that forum from the very early days, and I'm sure that will continue. So we have a role to play as part of the Resilience Forum, but it isn't just our responsibility, but we will contribute to support to care homes through that forum.
Thanks, Philip. Mike?
In a similar vein to Councillor Morton, the thing being which I'm concerned about is that there is a very great likelihood that there will be a second spike in the autumn and winter, and what contingencies are we planning for in that event?
Within our recovery documents, we have a number of assumptions, and they're all assumptions because we can't predict with any certainty how this may or may not impact in the future. We're ready should we need to change our operation to reflect the changing circumstances out there if there is a second wave or such like. So we've taken the learning from our immediate response and make sure we've embedded that should we need to enact any processes or any ways of working as we move forward. And I know the same applies across our colleagues right across the county through the Resilience Forum. We've actively learned through this process and taken that learning to make sure we're ready to react if things deteriorate or change moving forward.
Thanks for that. Good, Mike. Linda.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to come at this at a slightly different angle, because with my Chairman of the Council's hat on, I've had a lot of contact from other members, obviously, but also very much so from the wider community. And I think there's several lessons to be learned here. The community have learnt and understood the broader range of services that the council offer. Because for some of them, as long as their bin got emptied, they didn't worry about the rest of it. But because we've been in different times, they've actually learnt about all the other services that go on. And I've had so many compliments. I have had some concerns as well. But the concerns have been about systems and processes rather than individual departments or people. And not just with Breckland Council, but with some of our fellow agencies. So for instance, it took me 3 hours to do a safeguarding referral in Norfolk County Council, which is not good enough. That family was in danger. We got it sorted, but so as part of the recovery and review, we need to look at systems and processes. I think from a community point of view, and I'm sure some of my fellow councillors will agree, the issues that have been important to people have completely changed since we've been going through this situation. So whereas a minor bit of antisocial behaviour, like someone kicking a football into their garden, was a major thing and they wanted an officer to deal with it, that's gone in the main. What has bobbed up, especially in the patch that Councillor Hewitt and I cover, is the issues of domestic abuse, housing and homelessness. So I think moving forward, and I'm sure everyone is understanding this, the council needs to change its priorities of what is important to the community and what needs to be given higher priority than other things. And my final point is all the community groups that sprung up, some were already in existence, but others sprung up overnight, have been absolutely invaluable. And we need to keep that community involvement going on, because even if we get through this, that we know there'll be a second, maybe a third spike, there could be something else around the corner. But if the communities are much more ready and resilient to look after each other and help each other, that will be a huge step. Thank you, Chairman.
Rob, do you want to respond at all on that, or are you happy to take Linda's statement as read?
I'll take Linda's statement, but I agree the patchwork of voluntary and community organisations across the district needs to be built on and retained and strengthened, because that's one of the key strong points that came out of this response.
Thank you. I've got Ian, then I've got Fabian, then I've got Tim. Could anyone else indicate if they want to? Ian?
Thank you, Chairman. First off, can I repeat some of the congratulations to how well Breckland has actually responded. The organisation has actually been out there and has been making things happen. And while there may have been the odd hiccup with grants at the beginning, most of the comments I've had back from businesses is they've been overwhelmed by just how quickly the money has appeared in their bank accounts. There was a bit of a hiccup over village halls, and it took a few weeks to resolve. But once we resolved it, the money was out to the village halls as well. I know in one particular instance, the lady thought that they were getting £10,000, which she thought was fabulous. And when she heard it was £25,000, there was concern they were going to need to use the defibrillator that was attached to the village hall. So huge thanks and support on that. Very quickly, just picking up on the point on community groups. A lot of these are established. I've certainly been involved actively locally with a number within Pools of My Patch. What we're looking at is a number of them moving across to being good neighbour schemes. We need to make sure that Breckland is linked with those schemes for the future, so that you know the resources that are available and we can mobilise if we need to if, God forbid, we face anything similar in the future. Just coming back to the processes and the way Breckland has responded, I would be grateful for the rationale about one particular area. Understandably, right at the beginning, there was effectively the emergency revised scheme of delegation of authority, which effectively passed most decision-making responsibilities across to officers, which was completely understandable. But that was at the end of March, and that was in advance of the publication of the COVID regulations by the government, which then enabled remote working, remote meetings. And I would like to understand, first off, why, following that, there was no need to revise the scheme of delegation, given that there was the facility to hold remote meetings. And secondly, the speed at which Breckland is actually, albeit now, thank goodness, starting to operate remote meetings. And I note from the recovery plan that that's planned to go on now through for the bulk of the rest of the year. So it's a good place where we've got to. It's just a greater understanding of why it appeared to take longer for us to get there would be appreciated. Thank you, Chairman.
I'll start. Max may want to come in on this as well. I think in terms of the schedule to get meetings back up, I think it was a deliberate strategy on ours to trial it with Chairman's panel and make sure we had it working as effectively as possible before then introducing it to Planning Committee, to Scrutiny, to Cabinet and such like. So we wanted to use it in Chairman's panel because it gave us the opportunity to make sure we had the systems working. It was effectively, and we didn't have the glitches in the system that some of the early adopters had elsewhere in the country. So I appreciate we were slightly later getting virtual meetings and a full cycle of meetings up and running than some other areas. But that said, some of the local authorities who went earlier experienced problems that we haven't had to experience because we learned from that early process moving forward. So apologies if it felt like it took a while to get those up and running, but I think quite quickly we've now got a full cycle of meetings planned, and we took the learning from those early days in Chairman's panel. I think in terms of the officer delegations, it's Max will know better than I, but it's set out within the Constitution that when actually you're into an emergency situation and decision making needs to be expedited, there's provision within the Constitution regarding leader decisions and also officer decisions as well to move things forward. We don't take those delegations on lightly. We appreciate that actually where possible we need to use the democratic forums and committees to make those decisions, but I think you'll appreciate it was we needed to respond quickly and fast in those very early days, and it was appropriate that we were fleet of foot and were able to make those decisions quickly. Max may well want to add something, but I think hopefully that summarises why we chose that approach.
I think you've summarised that fine, Rob. I don't need to add anything, I don't think, unless Councillor Martin needs me to.
Thank you, Ian. I've got Fabian and Tim. Fabian.
Thank you, Chair. I've actually got three, but just to touch on the first point about the second wave, I'm probably suffered more from, although I've been livestock diseases, this is actually my business's fourth lockdown in 20 years, and each time 6 months and closing down. And I'm afraid, I think the council needs to assume on this, the second wave about it, you have to assure it's if and not when. And I'd always say, my business, we're already making the assumption, not unless they're changing for the vaccine, I will close my business down totally for the month of January. And I think we need to be prepared on what we can do to mitigate any spread within Breckland, and we're ahead, not trying to stop it once it's there, we're ahead of the game. And I think that shows leadership to the whole of our district of what we're doing. And if it bounces off to the rest of Norfolk, well, Breckland's the best district council, so let all the other councils follow us, in my point. Just coming back to it again on the grant schemes, the village hall thing, all praise to the council, the officers, they got the money out, I found no problem, and there was organisations with basically converted, if you like, little blacksmith sheds. They've got things, they had a rateable value, they got the grants, and they're ecstatic. And I had to persuade some, but they said, no, we're just not eligible. And I think that's actually helping the community effort, because I know a couple in my area, they're now going to do the organisations that are generally there for the local villages. They're not charging any rent for the village hall, because they said, we've already had the money passed down to us, and we're sharing our good benefit to help the community and to get people out within their community again. And we have to concede, in most cases, our local villages, they have very, very big and spacious village halls, perhaps bigger than the village needs, and it will give the people space and confidence to get out. But just to come down to the grants and some of the contact, I've found from speaking to businesses, touching on, first of all, environmental health, if you already had an established contact with environmental health, you got an excellent response on what your business needed to do. If you haven't had any previous contact with environmental health, we did slack and we missed out people. There was a very, very slow response to those, and perhaps that's something that can be dealt with in the future. And just touching on the other grants, particularly the discretionary, and it's obviously we are now dealing with it after the horse has bolted from the stable, but the initial set out for the grant was very off-putting to the people, particularly the market traders, to how they got it. And even when I saw it, it wasn't an easy form. It took several hours. And when I first saw that form, I thought it was actually left up, it was incorrectly loaded, and it was the form for the second tier of people who were expecting the bigger businesses, the ones who'd missed out on the original rateable grant. And it did put people off. I know, and others, we literally had to persuade, have still not applied for that, because they said, it's obvious they don't want us to have it. They've said they're going to do it, but why would you put a form up like that? We're probably going to get turned down. I think we must remember, when we do something, we're one district council, but we have lots of different people and different businesses and layouts, and we should have those forms scrutinised and checked to see if they fit the purpose they are doing before going out. We cannot assume that one size fits all. And the result got sorted. Most people were sorted, but we could have done that better. And that's what I'm saying. It's not there with hindsight, and certainly there it could have done better, but that's just my points. Thank you.
Chairman, if I may come back on those points, I think the feedback on the form for the discretionary grants is noted. I think we took that feedback early and made some changes. It's no defence, but obviously we're acting at pace, and perhaps it wasn't quite how we wanted it, but hopefully we listened and adapted it following feedback in those early stages. And I'm pleased to say that discretionary grant scheme has been well subscribed, and there has been a good uptake of local businesses. So hopefully the ends a good result in the end. I also know the feedback in terms of environmental health regarding new contacts versus established contacts, and I'll make sure that's picked up by the team. In terms of planning moving forward, just to reassure members, as part of the public health effort led by Norfolk County Council, we're a party to all the outbreak management and outbreak plans that are in place for Norfolk. So from a senior political and an officer level right through to our public protection and environmental health teams, we're actively engaged in management and trying to prevent outbreaks from occurring. From an environmental health point of view, that means proactively engaging some of our bigger risks and our high-risk sites to ensure that the appropriate measures are in place to try and stop outbreaks from occurring. So please have our assurance that is right up our agenda. We're actively supporting Norfolk's public health team in preparing and managing for outbreaks should they occur.
Thank you, Rob. Fabian, satisfied? Thank you. And Tim.
Thank you, Chairman. Respect to Councillor Martin, I think you're actually picking up some of the important issues about timing and the way that we've been relatively slow to get the democratic process going. And slightly mixed messages, Rob. Sort of, on one hand, we're fleet of foot to actually get things going, and on the other hand, we'll hang on and we'll let others make mistakes. So it's a slightly mixed message. one of the things that you've mentioned a few times now is that there are recovery documents, and I wonder whether we might have sight of some of these recovery documents so that we can have some input to them. Are they going to be published for everybody, or can they go on the members area of the website so that we can actually have some input and see where we're going? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Apologies if you think there are mixed messages. I don't think there are. I think we took a clear approach to reintroducing the democratic processes, and we still had to take decisions quickly on important matters. I think we needed the right constitutional processes in place to do that. So I don't necessarily agree with you. Regarding the recovery documents, there'll be a presentation following in this agenda by Jason Cole, who's leading our operational recovery programme for us. As and when decisions are taken as part of this recovery programme, they will of course come through the democratic process, and they will come with reports and documents for you to scrutinise and for you to look at. So yes, there will be documents coming forward. It starts today with a presentation from Jason Cole, and hopefully it will follow on from that with more detail.
Thank you, Rob. Tim, any comeback? Were you satisfied?
Well, only I would like to have seen some documents beforehand rather than after the event.
Just to reiterate the point made earlier, we were asked to prepare a presentation. We're giving presentations in future as we head towards recovery. No doubt it will revert to the more formalised reports, but we responded to the request of the Commission to provide presentations today, so that's why there are no reports.
It is, of course, possible later on in the meeting, Tim, that we could consider resolutions around documents if that's something the Commission's minded to ask for. And I would, of course, remind all councillors that you have a common law right to know. You individually can request, well, within reason, almost any document that the council holds for your personal view only. Maxine will, of course, jump in if she feels I'm overreaching on the powers of individual councillors. Terry, I understand that you have a question, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. No, I just wanted to come back on the 89% take-up of the grants. Is there any clarity now on whether the government will allow councils to reallocate that money to other businesses? Because there remains several people, several organisations that haven't been eligible either for the first round of grants or the second round of grants. And just on the discretionary grants, I haven't seen anything to the contrary, but can we assume that that's been fully allocated now? So just an update on what's the next steps really, and potential support for people that haven't been supported thus far.
Okay, I think in answer to the first question, Councillor Jeremy, the answer is I think we're still waiting clarity, but as soon as I will double check, and once we have clarity, we'll provide that for you. But I think we're still waiting the formal clarification. In terms of the discretionary grants, from recollection, and I need to check the detail again, I think there was slightly undersubscribed and there was a residual amount of funding left. So the intention is to go back out and re-offer that so that the businesses can apply. And I understand that if that hasn't happened already, that'll be imminent.
Brilliant. Thank you.
I don't see any more indications for questions at this stage. Excellent, thank you. In which case we'll move on to item 8. Sarah, I think you're leading on the performance report.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. The next presentation to share with you is providing a summary of how the council has performed. Jason Cole is going to go through this with you. You will notice it's a different format to the performance dashboard that you're used to, but they do highlight, the slides will highlight how the performance and the demand of our residents has differed to that of the pre-COVID environment. And as Rob has been alluding to, the stories behind the data is key to where we're at the moment. And we feel that there is a good opportunity to start beginning to use that data to make an impact in the lives of our residents, as opposed to just comparing the data quarter after quarter. So Jason will go through the report with you, or the slides with you, and we look forward to hearing your feedback to help shape what this could look like in a different way moving forward. So I'll hand you over to Jason.
Thank you, Sarah. Just before Jason speaks, if members do have any concerns about the change in performance report, I'm conscious, obviously, that we only just went through a change period on the performance report. You can blame me because I said that I thought that this particular format to compare the pre and post coronavirus approach would be appropriate. So please direct all opprobrium to me if that is an issue that you have concern about. Jason.
Thank you, Councillor Suggett, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just before I go into the report, I think I should probably touch on that point. We have an active dashboard for the response and into recovery phase, which we use in almost all of our meetings at the moment, if I'm honest. It covers customer grants, vulnerabilities, the rough sleepers, etc. Some of the core metrics that we're managing and monitoring at the moment. We will reintroduce the recognised standard performance reporting, as Councillor Suggett just suggested, but we've got to recognise that actually things aren't going to be the same. So we're going to take this opportunity to revisit the previous measures and make sure that we have something suitable and refreshed in place going forwards when we exit recovery. Thank you. Julie, if you don't mind moving on a slide. So, and again, apologies, due to some of your detailed questioning, many of your points have already been, these points have already been covered when Rob has spoken to you or Max, but we've had over 2,000 shielded residents that we've contacted, and that's been over 3,700 calls. Now, some have had individual circumstances where they don't need to be contacted again because they've got suitable support networks, but in other cases, there's been multiple calls and multiple contacts. Over £28 million of grant funding that we discussed, and that's supported 2,400 Breckland businesses, and over 18 million of that has been awarded as part of the small business grants. 8 million, or over 8 million, went to the retail, hospitality and leisure industry, and the discretionary grants that were discussed earlier had over £1 million going out to businesses that weren't able to meet the criteria of the overarching grant scheme. A really great stat is that we had no one in the district rough sleeping, and and unfortunately it's a high number, but we've had 125 people in supported accommodation. And linking back to the previous comments around the community support as well as the activity within the council, we delivered over 15,000 meals and 595 medical prescriptions delivered, and that number continues to increase but at a slowing rate. Thank you, Julie. If you don't mind moving on to the next slide. As you would expect, we've seen significant movement in the way residents engage with us. We've got 16,000 more visitors to our website compared to last year for Q1, and that's just under a 20% increase. We've had less than 250 calls per day in our contact centre. Absolutely, we have adapted that service to focus on the vulnerable residents, but also I think that's an outcome of our outbound communications. As Rob referenced, we've got an appointment service offered and where needed, but due to really effective triage, we haven't had to do a face-to-face appointment in a secure and safe environment at Elizabeth House or Breckland House. We've had over 700 new subscribers to the council's garden waste since the end of 2019, 2020. And I'm glad it wasn't just me that was spending a lot of spare time at the weekend in the garden. We received, as a stat that Rob had earlier, an increase in planning applications. And I was really pleased with our enhanced IT provision to enable remote working, something that I work closely on with a lot of other officers. That included doubling our bandwidth within the organisation, which is no mean feat in such a short space of time, a rapid rollout of considerable additional hardware, laptops, etc., and also new software to support those laptops and also to ensure that the customer contact centre was able to work remotely. A really big change and shift in the way we operate our council. We had a programme of virtual committee meetings which are up and running as suggested earlier. We also recommenced several of the major projects such as Snitterton and Breckland Bridge. Thank you, Julie. We also accelerated transformation. COVID-19 has probably been one of the best transformation opportunities to strike, and has actually forced many global, national and local chief technology officers or businesses or chief digital officers to really rethink their strategy, or also to benefit in the way that customers have been dealing with us. I'll speak more about the Build Back Stronger that Rob mentioned earlier when we come on to item 11 on the operational recovery. We maintained the delivery of all of our critical services throughout the COVID pandemic, but we should recognise that whilst there have been some operational benefits, reduced recycling contamination rate is one of those, and a massively increased tonnage, which obviously helps some of the rebate we received. But many issues remain, for example, fly tipping, which remained at the same rates as last year, unfortunately. Changes the way we communicate with our residents. I've already mentioned that digital channel shift, but there have been considerable benefits to our residents and businesses from our outbound activity, from letters and calls, but also feet on the ground, including the increased engagement from our members being out. Some of you may have already used or noticed the chatbot, which is on our website. We launched it in a soft way so we could test and learn from the activity and the engagement. It's our first use of AI or a digital worker, but it's an exciting first step and was really well supported by members and the officers. And it's generating a whole host of data which can benefit our customers going forward. And as Max will talk to shortly, we continue to work towards an agile workforce. So from a performance perspective, in summary, I think we've rapidly enabled remote working across the organisation, continue to deliver all critical services whilst providing a host of additional services that have already been discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Are there any questions from members? I'm scanning. I've got Tim and I've got Terry. Okay, Tim, you kick off. I'll keep scanning.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Previously, you've given me access to the Pentana system that you've got to keep track of actually how things are going, how performance is going on, and we've seen that through OSC before. I'm actually logged in at the moment, and all the data's gone missing. So, is that? Are you still using Pentana? Is the data still available? Will it come back? How are we going to keep track of how the system is, how Breckland's performance is working? Thank you.
If I may respond, we do still use Pentana, Councillor Burt. It may be a dashboard configuration issue. Absolutely, the focus our colleagues to ensure that we deliver the outcomes that are needed. Configured, and the data is available.
Sorry, Tim, did you get all of that answer? Because I missed quite a lot of it. You cut in and out there, Jason. Do you want to give that another go?
Oh, my apologies. Possibly a home bandwidth issue. We do absolutely still use Pentana. It hasn't been used as thoroughly as previously because of the situation and the revised focus on the active dashboard. It may be a configuration issue with your existing dashboard, Councillor Burt, but it's something I can pick up with the team and make sure we link with you to make sure that data is available and you have a suitable view and dashboard. So my apologies if there's an issue at the moment.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Jason. Terry.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Jason, for the presentation. Just a couple of points which I appreciate may not be your remit, so apologies if it's not. I'll ask them anyway, and then we can take it from there. Just on rough sleeping, I did contact Breckland during the sort of lockdown period about this, and I was conscious that not all of those people that were rough sleeping were rehoused, albeit temporarily, within the district. Obviously, there was sort of capacity issues with so many people in one go needing support, as well as sort of legacy capacity issues. I just wondered if you could comment on sort of ongoing support and dialogue with them, because presumably, even though they're now housed elsewhere, they still remain linked to Breckland, particularly in terms of food and medical provision and ongoing support. I know some were rehoused in Norwich, and sort of Norwich councillors spoke to me about sort of challenges of having so many people housed at one time. So that's one issue, and I see Rob's got his hand up. The other one is around sort of quantifying support available to businesses, because you touched upon different support mechanisms. There's been a whole range of support schemes, grant schemes, that sort of thing. And I just wonder really how we will monitor the take up in Breckland from a performance point of view of either businesses ceasing trading or on a positive light, businesses accessing support, and whether there's opportunities now that we have better dialogue with businesses in Breckland to link that with our performance monitoring.
If I may, Chairman, I think I'll help out with the housing one. You're quite right, Councillor Jeremy. We used properties outside of the local authority boundary to house, to use as temporary and emergency accommodation. Predominantly, that was one hotel within the Norwich local authority area that Norwich were also using. As you can imagine, this client group do need a lot of support and a lot of sort of wraparound services. So yes, we used premises out of that side of the district. We had to, because essentially all our usual places had closed down during the pandemic. So it wasn't through choice, it was through necessity. And we're actively trying to bring those people back within the district. Even though they're residing temporarily outside of Breckland, our offices are continuing to support them. At the outset, that was virtually, but then following from the client group and also from our team, we did a full risk assessment and enabled face-to-face work, face-to-face visits with that client group to make sure that they have the support in place. And that involves things like food deliveries, food parcels, meals being delivered, but also some of the more complex wraparound services that you'd expect with that group of residents. So they were one of the first face-to-face visits we risk assessed and enabled to make sure that suitable support was in place. But please be assured we're actively looking to house those residents in a sustainable fashion within Breckland. And one of the key stats is, of the people who've used temporary accommodation during the COVID pandemic, 51% of those are now housed elsewhere. So the numbers have been high, but actually there's been a degree of churn within that system, and 50% have been moved on to new accommodation elsewhere. The numbers are still high and it's still a challenge, but that's a challenge that's facing pretty much every local authority in the country. On the second point, the business point, I briefly alluded to earlier, we're creating a new sort of district dashboard, which is going to include things like number of furloughed staff, number of people using universal credit, number of jobs retained, jobs lost, jobs gained, all those sorts of things. And I think most of the data will be available on a monthly basis and it'll come from a variety of sources, but hopefully we'll be able to collate that into a single dashboard, and no doubt that's something that Jason and the team can share at future meetings of Scrutiny.
Thank you. Satisfied, Terry?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Are there any more questions on this part of the report? I don't see any indications. So I am going to move on to item 9, the commercial assets update. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me and the commercial assets team to talk to you. If I may, I will say a few words now, broadly in terms of what the commercial team do, and then I will pass over to Ralph Burton, who will lead you through the presentation that follows. The commercial team is a small team that provides a big service. It's a service that impacts in terms of us and our residents, £45 million worth of assets, £750,000 plus of square footage lettable space across our 5 market towns, all of which focus on trying to keep the council tax payers' inputs in terms of our business low. And as a part of the council, the team have contributed some nearly £3 million every year for the last 5 years, which in council tax terms works out at about £70 per person, £70 per tax-based property. From that perspective, the commercial team provide an effective buffer, but that buffer, of course, does come with a commercial risk. We are a landlord and an investor in our own high streets, and we are not immune to the business and the commercial pressure that our tenants face within those high streets. Over the last few months, we've had requests for help from some of our tenants, many of which are and should remain commercially sensitive and not really possible to share in public, but all of which we look at as a responsible landlord, looking in terms of how we can monitor, manage and address any commercial issues and challenges as a landlord, but taking on board as well our added responsibility for our residents and also for the communities in which our assets are based. Members are probably aware of the ONS data out today, with bank lobbying, with the Resolution Foundation also lobbying, and be aware, of course, of the financial pressures in terms of what negative yields are producing in the AAA rated bond space that suggest this part of our council work is becoming increasingly important. We are not yet in a position where we can look forward with absolute confidence, but I am convinced that we have the right team, and it will be to this team that I now pass on to deliver the presentation to you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hewitt. I'll go through the slides, and obviously we can take questions at the end, as we are doing. I think the first two slides that I'm going to show you and talk you through is a snapshot of the performance of the commercial property portfolio as things stand now. And I emphasise that point because I mean as things stand as of sort of this week, this quarter, and that will become more relevant as I talk through the slides, because the pandemic will have a knock-on effect, but it's very, very early days to see the actual effect yet on the property market, certainly the commercial property market, and certainly obviously locally in our terms, in terms of our commercial property portfolio. So just as a quick reminder, investment assets are held for financial return purposes. So it follows that most of the performance management framework for the commercial assets is likewise financially driven. So unfortunately, it's a bit number driven. We have many different measures of performance for the portfolio, and overall we have about 11 performance indicators. Some of these are key performance indicators, and some are indicators to help inform sort of day-to-day management and future planning, and they are indicators around condition of stock and maintenance backlog. But they're all involved in informing future decisions on asset management. So as Paul alluded to, whether we invest, whether we retain, or whether we dispose of the properties. So I'm just going to look at three indicators first of all, and this is the first one, occupancy. So historically, occupancy, we've measured occupancy for many years in the council as a key performance indicator of your commercial property portfolio. The shaded part on the slide is obviously what's happening right now in 2020, 2021. So you've got the actual percentage of the occupancy compared to what our sort of target is. And you can see across the main portfolio, and we split out the two business centres separately because their occupancies can be managed slightly differently. But we are about 1% short against our target. And that to give you an idea of what that means. So for the main portfolio, that means we've got about 13,000 square feet that is void and currently not let, out of a total of about 760,000 square feet, which is what Councillor Hewitt alluded to in terms of the size of the portfolio. So that's not a lot different at the moment to where we would normally be. But as I will keep coming back to, this is a timing issue, and we are yet probably to see the full effects of the pandemic on the property marketplace. So Julie, if you can just go to the next slide, thanks. So the other two indicators out of the three that I want to mention is income and yield. More recently, we've been looking more closely at the income, particularly the gross income of the property portfolio, mainly because if you measure net income, there would be a lot of assumptions and judgments on overhead costs to manage the portfolio, given the way government accounting works. We look to measure on gross income in terms of sort of like a key measure. And as you can see, there was a bit of a jump in 1920 compared to 1819. And that was mainly due to two events, due to a lease renewal project that we were working on to go through and renew all of our backdated leases. And I'm pleased to say that that created a significant amount of annual revenue income. And also we relet one of the largest industrial units in the portfolio in that year that had been vacant the previous year. But as before, the shaded area is the current performance in the current quarter against our target. And as you can see across the portfolio, we're about 140k short against the target. And again, it's because we are just starting to see some of the effects of the COVID pandemic on the property market. We are just starting to see tenants who can't survive, tenants who are in difficulty, tenants who are having to give property back, or tenants who are asking for help with their lease terms. It does start, this current sort of quarter does start to include some of those variations that we're working on with the tenants. But as we complete those variations, so as we start to work through some of those negotiations, those discussions, and they start to conclude, because they're not straightforward, so they do take a bit of time to work through with the tenant and analyse the financial performance of the tenants and work out whether they can or can't pay and what is acceptable. Then we will see that this will look different in forthcoming months. So that's why I emphasise that this is a position now, but I think it will change as we move through. And then the bottom table on that slide is the third indicator, which is yield. We've recently started to measure yield of the portfolio, which is a much more performance measurement, accurate performance measurement, because it allows for all that expenditure costs of running the portfolio to be included. We undertake that yield analysis on an annual basis, usually through the summer, sort of June, July, August time, which is why we haven't got a target in the 2021 date yet. We usually have to wait for the capital values to come through in March, and we then usually, as I say, do that sort of through the sort of July, August period. The yield analysis is based on a forward look of costs that will be incurred in the forthcoming year against the expected income that we expect to earn from the assets. And as I said, it's based on the capital values that we obtain for the portfolio at a 31st of March date every year. We don't just look at those numbers, we then look at an environmental view. So we look around the edges, because numbers tell you one story, but there are sort of situations around the assets and what they're doing and how they're performing, how important they are, where they're located, who's in those assets, etc., what tenants are in those assets. And that helps us steer some key decisions around the assets, about retain or invest in them or dispose of them. We do undertake it on an asset by asset basis, unless the assets are in sort of terraces of units, and then we undertake it sort of on a whole terrace of unit basis. So we can drill down fairly low if we need to determine what is happening performance-wide for each asset or local asset group. And we also review the target year by year. We look at the commercial property, we take soundings, we look at what's going on in the commercial property marketplace, and we consider what yields the property market should be earning. And at the moment, our sort of target yield is 6%, as it was last year. And as you can see, last year we were at about 7.1. So I think we were performing quite well in terms of sort of managing our costs and our income. And as I said, we're yet to do the analysis this year. But I suspect if we did it in July, August, and then moved it through to later in the year, we would see a difference. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to share with you what we've been doing in the face of the COVID pandemic. So despite some of the team being redeployed, we've really worked hard to continue to offer property to let. Obviously, we're not a critical service, as Rob mentioned sort of at the start, but nonetheless, we've tried to maintain a service and tried to maintain that property that we've got vacant to let. And indeed, we've had inquiries through this sort of like last 3-month period, and perversely, we've had new lettings, which we probably hadn't expected. But there has been less activity than normal. We've continued to open our service offices in Dereham, Swaffham and Thetford. So some tenants expected us to close, and we had plans in place ready to do that, but we've managed to keep those open, which has been particularly helpful, I think, for those key worker tenants like DWP, like the health service, like NCC Social Services. And they've really welcomed us being able to sort of manage to keep those properties open as safely as we can. As well as that, we've embarked on a programme of proactively keeping in touch with the tenants, contacting our largest ones, the ones that probably are at greatest risk of being in difficulty, and checking in with them. And I think that's been very welcome to have that sort of like ongoing contact. And in fact, a number of the tenants have reported that they don't actually need support. I will add to that at this time, you know, that may change. This is a fast changing sort of situation. So we're on standby should that happen. And given the size of the portfolio that you hold, that the council holds as a commercial landlord, we needed to create something quite quickly to support the wider support being offered to businesses. Cash flow is king, still a key issue with these businesses. So we created the rent deferment scheme for those tenants that are in real hardship. And this has helped to control the state of the portfolio, as well as legally controlling the position of the tenants and having them in some controlled state rather than a very uncontrolled state. And that's been welcomed by a majority of the tenants that we've worked with that have had to use it. And I would say, I'd go as far to say, as that's helped stabilise their business, helped stabilise certainty for them in terms of sort of trading and ongoing trading. Other local authorities have done similar. I would say that we acted very quickly with that. Our aim was to ensure that our tenants as businesses in our district, supporting our district and supporting employment in district, were able to survive and give them that opportunity to survive. So we were really looking at the sort of like the longer term aspects there. We've also had to embark on changing some of the lease terms with some tenants. That's required restructuring lease terms to ensure longevity of the leasehold interests in the face of the alternative, which could be that the business goes out of business and we're left with vacant properties and vacant costs. So we've helped and we've looked at, and as you can imagine, every single one is different, and with circa sort of 200 tenancies, that's quite a significant piece of work that we've had to look at. So our caseload has increased in the team. The complexity of what we're dealing with has increased as a result. We've had lots of difficult conversations, and they do take some time to sort of process and work through. The rent arrears requires careful management at this time. We've got new COVID government legislation around non-eviction of tenants through non-payment of rent and through the Coronavirus Act. I'm pleased to say that at June, we are only at 0.2% of the income that's in arrears at 90 plus days. Our target in that indicator is 3%. So we are where we sort of normally would be, but I expect to see that increase from July onwards as the quarter day for June has become more known to us, and some tenants are struggling to meet their payments. I suspect that arrears position will increase, but I would also say that we are talking to every one of the tenants that are in that position and having sort of regular contact with them. I've not provided information today on an asset by asset basis, but if required, that information can be provided as a follow-up. However, I would just add that we've got ongoing discussions with about 6 of our major tenants, and it will not surprise you to know who those are. There are sort of largest tenants in the portfolio, and they do require some careful handling as well as some external expertise. Next slide, Julie, please. So just lastly, I wanted to touch on some intelligence for you. So some local intelligence and then some national intelligence, so you can see what we're hearing, what we're finding out, what we're trying to sort of respond to. At a local level, the portfolio continues to perform okay, but as I said before, there's a timing issue. That's as of now, but I suspect if we looked at this in 3 months' time, it would look different, as income will reduce and the impacts are properly felt, and as we complete some renegotiations, which will see some reduction in income for the portfolio. A lot of your commercial property portfolio is in tertiary locations, not close to the urban centres, sort of on the outskirts in industrial locations. And because a lot of the portfolio is industrial, it's not necessarily seeing the impact of COVID as other sectors, the key sectors of leisure, retail and hospitality, which have had to close and reduce trading, as we all know. Some businesses are finding it more difficult than others, again, notably those that are talking to us in those sort of leisure, retail and hospitality sectors. And we do have some larger tenants in those sectors. For those of you who know the portfolio, you look at the Riverside scheme in Thetford, for instance, and that is where we were spending a lot of our time talking to those sort of like larger, sort of more national or regional tenants. Locally, tenants are telling us that they are having difficulties, obviously, as expected, and they are literally only considering their business situation on a month-to-month basis. So they are literally looking at this in a very short-term view. But as has already been mentioned already today, the business grants from the government and as distributed by the council has been significant for some of those smaller businesses in our units, and has been an absolute lifeline for them. And then the last slide, Julie, is the situation sort of nationally, so a bit of national intelligence. So I think it's fair to say that no one has any concrete answers as to what the future of the commercial property market looks like at this time. Most commercial rents nationally are collected on a quarterly basis. Therefore, the analysis in April, May of the March quarter payments is too early to give an indication of the impact. Obviously, as we were right at the start of the pandemic then, the June quarter payments that obviously went out sort of 2 to 3 weeks ago, the ones where we will start to see the shock, it'll be more known. And for us, we are in touch with all of those tenants that have a June quarter payment and that are having difficulty. So we are sort of fairly on top of what's happening there. Some of the landlords nationally have stated that their rent collected is less than 30% of the total rent, which is quite a severe position for some of those sort of national landlords to be in. But again, it won't surprise you to know that's the leisure and retail sectors, mainly the high street, etc., and the hospitality trade. And there's no expectation that that's going to recover soon. Alternative support's been asked for of landlords, like company voluntary arrangements. We've had experience of 2 of those so far in our portfolio. They're significant. We have to act quickly. They're quite complex. And we have to take views very quickly and take external advice, particularly when you're faced with a proposal from a tenant, from a business who are seeking that support. For the office sector, I think the market demands are going to change. You know, there'll still be a need for a role to have some kind of office space to produce productivity. But as remote working grows, space will be required will be less. That's quite obvious. And we may see tenants start to exit from leases or seek breaks of their leases. But for the industrial sector, I think it's slightly different. I think this sector has seen the strongest demand for space in the last decade, and many have traded positively through COVID. But again, those which are in the supply chain for leisure, retail and hospitality, they are sort of probably hit hardest. But the rise of e-commerce will give further rise to storage space requirements and logistics. So I think the expectation is that demand will remain stable and values will probably stabilise as well. But overall, you know, tenant landlords are expecting to get hit harder with lease terms. So we're going to expect tenants to seek more breaks in their leases and probably shorter terms, so less security of income. And as I've mentioned, we've got the COVID legislation on rent collection, and that's now extended from non-forfeit of leases through non-payment of rent from June now to September. And obviously we don't know where that's going to go next from there on. So my last point is, I think the pandemic is an incredibly unsettling time for many of those where their commercial property is a significant overhead for their business, and its impact is likely to be felt long after any plans of the government to return to life as near normal as we can. But this will lead to changes in the commercial property marketplace. But overall, it's just a little bit too early to tell right now to determine how this will affect our portfolio. Needless to say, it will affect future investments such as that we may want to make, such as building of new units, and also our asset strategy for what property we wish to hold and what level of risk we wish to take in the future. We could never have foreseen this, but I think this will, like many things, change the way in which we hold property, and we hold property for commercial purposes in the future. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ralph. I am looking for any questions from members. I have a few, but I would like other people to be able to go first. I've got Tim and I've got Harry. And I don't think I've got anyone else at the moment. So Tim, if you kick off and then we'll go to Harry.
Yes, thank you very much. The offer for an asset by asset assessment is very useful, and I think that actually would be valuable for us so that we can see the direction in which things are going. I fully understand this is a very dynamic situation. Things are changing now, and they are going to change quite rapidly. And I think that's all the more reason to have an ongoing assessment and these asset by asset basis, perhaps on a monthly basis rather than quarterly, so that we can actually see the trends and we can get ahead of the curve when there are going to be issues. It would be useful with your expertise to be able to give us a prediction on income yield, sort of a worst case and a likely case of how this is going to develop. And obviously, I do appreciate that this is it's all likely to change as more evidence and more data comes in. One other thing on the capital values, you said that should have come through end of March. Has that actually come through and we just don't have the figures yet, or is that yet to be done? And when will we next do the capital values? Because obviously, if we wait a year, again, things are changing so rapidly at the moment, that's probably too long. We probably want to be assessing capital values much more rapidly so that we can follow what's actually happening. Thank you.
Would you like me to try and answer those in turn, Chairman? I think
yes, please.
I think there were 4 questions there. I'll try and go back over them. Well, we've got the asset by asset data, unless they're in asset groups, like I said in the presentation. So I think subject to that not being commercially confidential, we will look to see how we can supply that to the Commission offline. The ongoing assessment question, so you can see the trends and get ahead. You know, subject to your view about your work programme or what you'd like to see and when you'd like to see that. We produce that performance data on a quarterly basis. We can look to see whether we can produce that on a more regular basis and provide that with the performance indicator statistics that we normally do. So we can look to see whether we can do that for you. The yield prediction question, yeah, I mean, I go back to what I sort of said in the presentation. It is so difficult to try and predict what's going to happen. I would say that if you asked any commercial landlord or any commercial agent, they would not be able to give you a prediction in terms of reading the journals and the press that I have been doing over the last few weeks. No one is wanting to pin anything, their sails to the mast to say what's going to happen. We can only go on the data that we've got and the intelligence that's coming through the system. I would say that we will always look to manage our costs and overhead as closely and as we can. That's something that we're commercially driven to do with this part of the business of the council, because we know it affects the return and the yield of the property. And obviously we'll seek to secure that income as best we can. So I think I'll consider that, but I'm not sure that I'm going to be in a position to sort of give you any sort of accurate prediction of yield or wish to sort of like go to that stage at this moment in time until we sort of see some more data. And in terms of the capital values, yes, we would have the capital values. We've got the capital values for 31st of March. You know, they come in every year on the 31st of March. And we would have them again next year. They're done on a cyclical basis. That's how they're done at the moment. There probably won't be a lot. Normally, there's not a lot of shift year by year, but we will seek to do that yield analysis, like I say, through sort of June, for July, August time, and seek to see what sort of like is coming forward for the next coming year.
Thank you, Ralph. Are you happy, Tim, or do you want to come back? Thank you. I've got, who did I say next? Harry, then I've got Terry, then I've got Fabian, and then I'm going to allow myself to speak.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think I heard most of Councillor Burt's question, but the audio from Councillor Burt's end isn't quite so good where I'm hearing it, so I may be repeating some of his question. Firstly, as a sort of generic point for the whole of the Commission today, I'm hoping that all the slides in the near future, at the very least, we placed on the members section, so we can either review them, but also any members that haven't taken part today. That's just a general request. First observation to Councillor Hewitt and also to Ralph, thank you very much for your slides. Obviously appreciate it's a very fluid and uncertain time, and we know you've got to take quick decisions. The first question is how far the work of the this commercial arm of Breckland is going to potentially be affected. I think the fairly recent advice from the Treasury to local authorities was about the wisdom, generically speaking, of investing in, you know, commercial property and exposing to risk. So that's a general question, whether it's affecting us or not, or in the future. And the second part is appreciating a lot of the difficulties that Ralph referred to are commercially sensitive with tenants, some of whom I'm sure may well have been asking for rent reductions pre-COVID existing situations, but in terms of the COVID situation, whether it's possible on a below the line basis, on a confidential basis, to have an understanding, not weekly and daily and hourly, of where our particular tenants and units are having difficulties. That's meant to be in a supportive way, so that we understand as members, and obviously appreciating that that's below the line and is going to change depending upon what happens in the pandemic. So that's my sort of question for now. Thank you, Chairman.
Go ahead, Ralph.
Okay. So I think the guidance around investment in commercial property, a lot of the SIPFA guidance before COVID there was obviously concerns about local authorities overstretching themselves, pushing themselves into places where they probably shouldn't go to in terms of risk and invest in commercial property. We know why they were doing that, and there was the response from the likes of Spelthorne Council, etc., about why they're doing that in the face of unable to sort of raise funds in any other way, or reduction in sort of central government funding. I think where the SIPFA guidance was going, a lot of those local authorities were relying on borrowing to invest. Now you haven't done that, Breckland councils haven't done that, so you've not got a borrowing burden on you. You've got an internal borrowing burden because you've tied up your capital in commercial property, so to speak. But I think there was a lot more control. And if you look at our Treasury policy, we've now got a lot more control in our Treasury policy about risk. So that's where we're investing our capital into property. Are we putting it all in too much one location, too much one sector? And there's now some indicators in our Treasury policy to make sure we've got a more balanced view of risk. And you know, it is, you know, investing in commercial property is a risk. And I said to somebody the other day, when it's good, it's good. And when the situation is good, it's good. When it's bad, the situation's bad and the economy is bad, it can be very bad. So we need to obviously keep an eye on that going forward, which is why my last point about the asset strategy going forward is probably going to look and feel quite different. You know, what we invest in, what we look to invest in to spread our risk. So we're not putting all our eggs in one basket, I suspect will look different. Your second point about getting some intelligence or some data on the tenants, about those particular tenants that are in difficulty. Yeah, the difficulty with that is all of this data is commercially sensitive, as you point out, because we don't want to adversely affect those tenants any more, you know, than they've already been adversely affected. So we have to just be careful about how we talk about that data sort of like openly. But we'll try, as responded to Councillor Burt, we'll try and look at what data we can give you to give you some assurance or some feedback of what's going on. And if we can, we'll try and get that down to sort of as local a level as we possibly can, if that will help.
Can I add,
Thank you.
Can I add to that briefly, Roger, if I may, Chair?
Of course.
Just kind of going back, I was talking to a global asset manager on Monday, Tuesday this week, who manages some 700 billion euro of assets, including large property exposure. and they were challenging exactly the same issue. What does the future actually look like with certainty? I have absolutely no doubt that actually the future is unpredictable, but through a robust process of risk, as Ralph says, return, yield, asset mix, correlation, churn, all of those, we can coordinate the process as strongly we can. We are unusual to a pure asset management business because we also are beholden, not just in terms of our commercial returns, important though they are, we're also beholden to the community in which our assets are based. We have an extra layer in terms of challenging whether we take a very robust stance to a particular asset or whether we kind of say, actually, that asset produces a community benefit, if not a commercial one. But we do look at everything in the round. And as Ralph says, we will continue to look in the round to make sure that what we do doesn't just add value to the tenant, but also to the wider community. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you, Paul. Harry, are you happy with that? Good stuff. I just add, of course, as a council, we have the right and opportunity to invest in assets outside of the Breckland district. And that may be something that later on we consider as another item. Obviously, it makes it a lot easier when you have difficult commercial times to take action, which is of a more commercial nature, because you don't have the overlay that Paul has literally just alluded to. I've got Terry, then Fabian, then Roger, then Marion. If anyone else could indicate. Terry, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points. Firstly, on the slide, Ralph, where you were talking about occupancy levels, forgive me if I missed it, but I wasn't sure, and I should know because I think we've discussed this before, whether that records units or square feet in terms of occupancy, because obviously they're two different things. That's just a minor point. I think it's square feet because you referenced square feet when you were talking, so but I couldn't write it down quick enough. So that's the first thing. And then similarly, when over the last few months, we've had the support aspect of what Breckland's doing, and that's increased communication with business. You and your team, no doubt, have had much more communication over the last few months and dialogue with our tenants. I'm a big supporter of sort of local procurement policies and maximising opportunities to support businesses in the district. Are we evaluating, quantifying, whatever you want to describe it, the services that our tenants are providing? You've spoken about sort of manufacturing businesses, and looking for what opportunities there are for us as a district or through our sort of publicity mechanisms and other sort of networks to really support Breckland businesses and to access, sell their goods to us, frankly, if wherever possible, depending what they supply, of course. But given we've got that increased dialogue with the body of the council and businesses in the district, particularly our tenants, are we going to maximise the benefit from that?
Should I try and answer those two questions, Chairman? Is that okay? So the first one, yes, it is square footage. We do the occupancy on square footage, not number of units, because that would give an unbiased view of what the portfolio is doing. So it is every square foot we count, whether it's let or not. The second point about procurement policies, I think I would say, I mean, it's not my area of focus, but we do have, I believe, within our constitution, the need to look internally within our own sort of economy in our own district to try and sort of support our existing sort of economy with sort of procurement and supply to the council. So I would say that that's already been undertaken. But I beg to be corrected if we need to do sort of like more to sort of like correct that position. But I would certainly say that a number of our sort of tenants, we're always looking to see whether what they're providing to us and trying to communicate with them when tenders come up or requests for quotes to come up to supply the council. So we're trying to do that sort of at a local level with the tenants wherever we can.
And if I can again follow up on that one, Chair, with your permission, with my separate hat on, as part of our work in WorkSmart 2020, we are wherever we can looking towards locally based suppliers for the work that we're doing within that whole refurb and committer suite and technology as best we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Are you satisfied, Terry? Any more?
I am, Chairman, but under the work programme item later, I might suggest an item there because I'm ever the optimist. There might be an opportunity for us to review that and to ensure it's as effective as possible.
As you know, I'm always delighted when you propose an item, Terry. So, I have just messaged everyone. After this item, we will have a 10-minute comfort break, but I do want to get through the last of the questions here and close off the item first. So Fabian, then Roger, then Marion. Fabian, if you go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just following on from Councillor Hewitt's comments on his introduction, I wasn't aware that the council actually owned any properties on the high street. Can they just confirm, if at all possible, please, which market towns they actually own them? And when they mean high street, do they actually mean retail units? And just putting on the other bit, I think, and I'd like to know, are we actually, how actively we're looking at changing the portfolio? And perhaps we might have to endure short-term pain for long-term gain. And just in response to previous comments, value of property value is unimportant if the yield still holds. So if you've got some good long-term tenants, they're paying the rent, it doesn't matter if our values collapse because we're still maintaining the original yield. So actually it makes the yield increase if you're going to look at it from a valuation point. And again, I don't think we should depart from some of those properties with haste because obviously those become brownfield sites that may allow development and prevent, shall we say, more scenic areas of Bretland being developed. Thank you.
I'll try and answer those if you would like me to, Chairman. So in terms of the retail units, it's a small number, I'd say, of units in the portfolio. They are all, from recollection, just in Thetford. So we've got some on a street, town centre street in Thetford, and obviously we've got the Riverside units, and we've got another large double unit in Thetford as well. So it's just mainly in Thetford. So we haven't got a significant presence on the high street, if I put it like that. So it's quite minor in terms of units, but in terms of quantum, in terms of value, there is a decent value, a proportion of the portfolio that's in retail. You asked about actively looking at changing the portfolio. Yes, you know, like I said, we do that now on an annual basis. The point I would make is properties long term, generally in nature, we can't move as quick necessarily as the private sector to dispose and invest because of our sort of systems and processes and who we are, but we do, and we have done, and we try to take advantage of things as best we can. But I think, yes, we will be looking more actively at changing and reviewing the portfolio, particularly because for you to be aware, the current asset management strategy is due for renewal. So this is actually a good time now to sort of review that policy and consider what you hold and why you hold it and how you hold it and what risk you want to sort of take. In terms of the yield, you're absolutely right, Councillor Eagle. And I absolutely do agree with your point about not departing from the disposing of assets with haste, which is why I sort of mentioned in the presentation, we do the numbers analysis, but then we have to stop and look about what's going on around that business, who's in that business, how close that business is to another asset of ours, you know, how complementary it is to another asset, whether it's giving access to another asset, etc., etc. We had such a case this last year where we had a set of businesses that were falling below the yield threshold, but they were right next door to a town centre car park, and therefore is an opportunity in the future for long-term redevelopment opportunities. So although that asset is not necessarily performing as well as to be expected, there are other community benefits in terms of regeneration, etc. So we don't just, or I would say we try not to exit at haste, as you say, and we take a fuller view.
Thank you, Ralph. Fabian, you happy?
If I just come back on a couple of things, and I'd like to thank Ralph. I think he says it on numerous occasions, but it's nice to be reconfirmed on his points on the whole property portfolio, particularly this time of year. But just coming back to the shops, and the retail units, I think that's going to be an important area. And as Councillor Hurt said, we also have to look at it from a community point of view, and we've got to look at the regeneration. And I think, you know, they're quite an important asset, and perhaps we should look at using them or utilising them perhaps as a lead example. I will just say, if we hold those properties in Thetford, it is a private landlord, but I think it's Moulton in Yorkshire, and they've actually been very proactive, kept their retail units in the town centre, and that is one of those towns now that people come to visit, and have done very well, kept the right mix of units, and they've, you know, they're very well praised. If anyone does want to Google up, it's very positive. So perhaps we could start looking at doing that for the same area here, please.
Thank you, Fabian. I've got Roger and Marion, and then we'll take a break. Roger. Oh, sorry, and Linda. I've seen you as well. Roger, go ahead.
Thank you. Ralph, are you able to tell me what percentage of the total stock is made up of office units? Because I think one thing this pandemic has taught us, that the use of offices, I think there will be more home working, and I think the need for office accommodation will be less. And on that basis, do we need to do a piece of work on the office stock that we have got to determine if any of that is suitable to change into other uses, i.e. retail? And if that's the case, do we need to budget for the fact that we may have to, certainly going to have to factor in refurbishment costs to make that happen? Thank you.
Go ahead, Ralph.
So in answer to your first question, Councillor Atwell, I can't tell you the percentage off the top of my head. I'm very sorry, but I will certainly get that for you. And I understand the point in terms of the change, which is what, again, the point I was trying to make in the presentation. We will see a downturn because of remote working. The office market, the offices we had in the portfolio pre-COVID was struggling a bit anyway, I'd say, across all of our sectors in your property portfolio. So we've got two business centres, one in Dereham, one in Thetford, and then we've got other serviced office accommodation in Swaffham and other locations, and they were suffering pre-COVID. I think that was what was happening in the office marketplace anyway. So I think I agree that I expect it to sort of like be different, or be probably worse and exacerbated. I will send you what the percentage is. I can probably send, it'd probably be easier just to send you the percentage of all the sectors that we've got on a sort of a pie chart basis to the Commission, so they can see the percentage that you've got in each sector, and we can do that quite easily. In terms of changing office units, absolutely, you know, I think we have to look at those alternative uses for those assets. We've mentioned sort of something that's more akin to sort of community use to support our sort of community use and vulnerability agenda and homelessness agenda and difficulty that we've got in the council at the minute. So I absolutely agree that we need to look at those if they're appropriate to do so. And obviously, as you say, Councillor Atwell will make any sort of provision in our capital programme accordingly. Our capital programme in terms of the commercial assets has been mostly around buy land and build units up to now. And we need to look at that and consider whether we use our capital value to sort of capital resources to do sort of something slightly different in terms of reusing our property in a slightly different way to support sort of our wider corporate objectives. So yes, I think reuse before disposal will always be the first opportunity.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, Roger. Marion, then Linda.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I'd just like to allude to the question that Ralph was asked about on tenants. I don't have the expertise of offices and assets, but I've been on the council for a while. And I feel that unless a councillor is contacted by a tenant to say that they are in difficulties, that information between a tenant and the council is strictly confidential and should not be shared with members. And I hope it would not be. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Marion. I'm not sure I entirely agree, but it would be a matter for Maxine. I think particularly in the case of major tenants where it's going to have a material impact on cash flow coming to the council, it may well be something that members should obviously, under below the line be aware of if there are negotiations ongoing in terms of how rent is being paid. But I note your point and I understand the sensitivity. Finally, Linda.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to pick up on the point that Terry raised about procurement. Again, as Chairman, I get contacted by a lot of individuals and commercial practices, many of whom are diversifying now, looking for other ways to make an income and so on, and offering us services. And whatever that service is, whether it's a commercial asset, an individual offering to clean the road signs, whatever it is, all that information is passed on to the correct department. And so we welcome this, the local interest in trying to make Breckland a better place to be, really. But do be assured that it is all passed on to the right department. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Linda. If I could just end this item then by saying a big thanks to Ralph for his very full answers, and particularly for us finally having a yield figure. It has been my mission for a while, as he knows, to get that, and I'm delighted that we have managed to start calculating that on a regular basis. So thank you very much for that. So I've had various responses. Some people felt 10 minutes was too long. Could I briefly ask then, we'll have a 5-minute break and I will reconvene at 12:10 on the dot, and you know me, I will start talking even if no one's here. So please be back.
Teresa, Julie, if I may, I will now pull out of this meeting. I've got some other stuff going on. Please, if somebody asks a question of me or perhaps of Ralph, please give my apologies and we'll answer afterwards.
Okay.
But I've got about 5 meetings that are stacking up. Sorry. Thanks ever so much. Thank you for that. And can I pass on to you my thanks to the chair? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Chairman.
No problem. We'll reconvene in 1 minute. Okie dokie, it's 12:10, so I think we'll restart. The item that we have now is the HR report. I think that's Maxine.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, thank you, Chairman. Firstly, wow, listening to all the reports or the presentations that have gone before, it makes me realise how much change we have had to go through very quickly. So I'm going to briefly just remind us and recap on the workforce strategy that the Council signed off in 2019, and actually consider how forward thinking we must have been, and maybe we could realise what was around the corner, but it's very relevant. Talk through some of the changes and how the workforce have had to adapt through this change, and share with members some of the successes of the response, some of the new wellbeing initiatives and how we've been supporting the staff, and also give you some highlights from the recent staff survey that we have done. Teresa, could you go to the next slide for me, please? Thank you. Okay, so just as a reminder, the Council signed up a workforce strategy back in 2019. The Commission were helped us with the creation of that strategy. It may need a little bit of tweaking to reflect the changes of COVID, but I think the tone is still very, very relevant. As I say, if only we'd have realised what we were doing, we must have been very forward thinking in considering that we needed to ensure that our employees had a good work-life balance. I'm not sure all of them do right now, but we'll come back to that. The appropriate technology and digital skills to feel connected, feeling supported and trusted in their work, and being able to work any place, anytime, anywhere. Also recognising that wellbeing was important. We recognised that staff wanted roles that made them feel that they were making a difference to their community, and a working environment which was safe and suitable for them. So we've obviously had to transform quite rapidly. No, you don't need to go to the next one yet, Teresa. We've, oh, the other way. I'll keep talking while Teresa finds the slides. But we needed to transform quite rapidly over the last 4 months to accommodate the changes that have been forced upon us. And we need to continually evolve. We need to make sure that the staff are equipped to make sure they can deliver for the council. Sorry, can you go all the way back, Teresa?
Sorry, Maxine.
It's okay. At the moment, one of the key things is that we are living and breathing that work is an activity that we do and not a place that we go. Obviously, our buildings are currently not being used other than for essential work that needs to happen. So considering when we go forward, I guess it's something that Work Smart 2020 is about to look at our workforce strategy and what we might need to change, but we need to consider how we use our buildings. How, are you okay, Teresa? And how we use our buildings going forward. I think one of the things we thought when we first had to get everybody out of the building, we thought, oh my God, the technology is not going to be up to it. And I'm pleased to say it has. Virtual meetings felt really radical to start with, but they're now become part of the day job, and we've adapted really quickly. Can you go all the way back to the workforce strategy one, please, Teresa? Thank you. And as Rob has already said, we've only got a handful of people physically going into Elizabeth House on a daily basis. That's mainly to do with some critical services that we need to provide from there. One of them being, believe it or not, the post, which is a very critical service that has to be done every day. And the only way at the moment we can do that. Are you okay, Teresa? Are you having a...
Sorry, the computer says no. I'll leave it on that screen.
You can go to the next slide. Thank you. It's hard when you're not in control of your own presentation. One of the things that came through my door in towards the beginning of April was this document that you can see, which says apart together. And one of the things that we certainly didn't think was that we'd be apart for more than 4 months, i.e. physically not able to get together. It's something that the staff have actually adapted really well to, and they say that although we're apart, they've got a real sense of togetherness whilst working remotely. We've had a large percentage of our people redeployed over the last 4 months, specifically supporting the work with the vulnerable people, supporting our businesses in the community, and more recently in our Confidence High Street campaign. So we've had over 60 of our staff constantly redeployed through this period. A lot of them are still redeployed, but some of them are going back. Teresa is a prime example on with us today. She's gone back to her day job, so to speak, but was redeployed in the communities team for quite a period of time. Some of the people have been doing work that they've never done before. It's never been part of their day job, and others have been redeployed who haven't been redeployed are actually doing work perhaps within their same field, but very differently. And an example would be finance, who had to create a procedure from scratch and process quickly business grants, something that they hadn't had to do up until COVID. Can you go to the next slide, please, for me, Teresa? Thank you. So some of the successes that we've had, we've been looking at staff statistics, can't get that word out, and that's been crucial to our success. So every day we have looked at our resources, how many people have been able to work. I'm pleased to say that our statistics are really good and that we've had 97% of people consistently working from home. 93% have been working from home really well, despite circumstances that they may have, such as caring responsibilities, being vulnerable themselves and shielded, childcare, teaching issues, and the responsibility list kind of goes on, but they've still managed to work and work effectively. We've therefore needed to be less focused on hours that the individual works, such as 9 to 5, and be really flexible to allow them to work outside of the normal office hours. So as long as they're focused on the outcomes and they're getting the work done, we've said that the core hours aren't there at the moment, but it is absolutely vital that people are able to deliver their job still, focused on their individual needs. People feel that they have a good life-work balance, which is something that we said in the strategy we wanted, so that's good. And I think we've been really flexible with home circumstances, which I've mentioned previously. Another issue that we've had to consider is the health and safety of our staff working at home. It's really important to make sure that each individual's work-home situation is understood by the organisation and the appropriate measures are put in place. Some of it is as simple as the loaning of a desk or a chair or an extra screen, just to help them be able to effectively work at home. And as you can see, productivity, we can see has remained high. In some cases, it's actually improved. And I think the contact centre was mentioned earlier, would be one of the examples of that. Can you go to the next slide, please, Teresa? So in terms of supporting our people, what have we done? We've provided probably more support than we normally would do, because now people aren't seeing each other day to day. I think that connection needs to be stronger. We've done a recent staff survey which shows that people do feel connected. We're using Zoom, Teams, LifeSize and any other technology you can think about to make sure that we can interact with our staff on a regular basis. We've got lots of training happening online, so we're doing some virtual training. We're doing team meetings weekly. We're doing daily staff briefings. We've had health and safety advisor doing various training packages around your desk assessment and how you're set up to work at home. And our very own Breckland training services have been providing us with agile training or agile working training for managers, but also for the teams as well. We've been communicating weekly to the staff through a weekly newsletter. And they've also been getting blogs and videos from the chief executive to hopefully keep them going. Can you go to the next slide, please, Teresa? Thank you. In terms of wellbeing, we already had a wide range of wellbeing packages at Breckland that are well used by the staff, and I have to say a lot of the members as well. But we've recognised with the impact of the situation, we've needed to put together some additional support. So these wellbeing initiatives, which are listed on the chart, have been well attended. We've done them all online now. We've also managed to speak to some of our providers to get them to flex and accommodate, such as doing online counselling sessions for those staff that need it, and also online occupational health reports. So we've managed to sort of flex and work with our people. We've also got a social Facebook page. So tonight, Sam, the leader, and also the chief exec are going to be doing a recognition event using Facebook Live so that the staff can hear about all the wonderful things that have been going on in the council and really recognise their hard effort and work. Could you go to the next slide, please? Thanks, Teresa. So the last slide is really just, I mentioned that we've done a recent staff survey. We've got lots of positive feedback from staff about the balance of work and life and how connected they feel. But obviously there are some people that are still hankering to get back to the office. And I think the reality is even going back to the office is not going to be the same. So we're trying to do quite a lot of communication with staff to say, actually, things are going to be different, whatever it looks like. We're trying to harness people's skills and passion. So as I mentioned earlier, we've got people that have been working in areas beyond what they probably ever imagined, but where they've got a real passion. So rather than slotting them straight back into the role they used to, we're looking at the skills that they've developed and how we can work with them to make sure we get the best out of them. That's really the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. I'm sorry that was a quick canter through. I was just quite conscious of the timing that we're on. But the next part of the slide goes into operational recovery, where we also talk about the staff as well.
Thank you, Maxine. If members would like, they can ask questions after the next one, or alternatively, they can ask some questions now if they have a burning desire so to do. I am not seeing, yes, Councillor Attawell, and anyone else, and Linda. Okay, so Roger, then Linda.
Thank you, Chairman. Maxie, just for the benefit of the public who might be watching this, can you just explain what a men's and a women's shed is, and more importantly, what a mixed shed is? I can't be the only one that's wondering what goes on in a mixed shed. I just think, I know it's all virtual, but I think it would be really useful if you could just take a moment to explain what they are, please. Thank you very much.
I'd be happy to talk about the mixed shed in a
Okay, yeah, it might be useful for me to get someone who attends one of the mixed sheds to explain it, Linda. But yeah, broadly, what we do is we have sessions that are set up just for the men of the organisation, and members are able to attend as well if they like. They are well publicised to talk about any issues that are bothering them, any concerns they've got, any mutual hobbies they might have together. We did them initially, it was a national scheme that came out around the med shed, and we started it up originally, and we had a lot of women saying, can we attend? And absolutely they can attend, but we now do one which is men and women together, just to talk about general life issues, things that are concerning them. Linda has attended several and is a good participant, so I don't know if you want to say something, Linda, about your experience.
Yes, thank you, Max. Yes, so I go along to the mixed shed, which is about supporting each other as carers within family or local groups. And it's we have several members go, several officers. So we've got everything from somebody having to look after a child 24/7 and still work, through to some of us with aged parents with dementia, etc. And we meet for an hour once a month. It's quite light-hearted, but the actual support for each other is huge. We swap tips and ideas. So, for instance, one of the officers had no idea that there was such a thing as an incontinence clinic. They do now. They tap into it for their folk, and that's made a big difference. And then we have a WhatsApp group amongst those named people. So even in between the meetings, we can ring each other up or WhatsApp each other and just keep everyone's spirits going. So it's really vital, and I will talk about it a little bit more at full council next week. Thanks, Max.
Thank you, Linda. So Roger, you want to come back. Linda, just before Roger speaks, did you have a separate point you wanted to make as well?
No, I was just going to expound about the mixed shed.
Okay, so we've covered mixed sheds thoroughly. Roger, you come back and then we'll go to Terry.
Thank you, Chairman. Just very quick point. Councillor Turner's just mentioned that members are attending some of these sheds, but I don't recall as a member receiving any information that these are even happening or an invitation to attend. I don't know if anybody else has. And obviously, is that invitation extended to all members if they wish to participate? I would just point out that all members, we're working remotely as well generally. So I don't know what's happened there, whether that's a failure of communication or whether that just went out to one particular political group. I don't know, but I would appreciate it if that invitation went out to everybody. Thank you.
For completeness, Roger, I also haven't attended any sheds, mixed or otherwise. Maxine, is it possible that members are invited to sheds?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I think the post-COVID, I think they did go out to all members. The pre-COVID ones, I think they've just done a couple of trials with staff, but they are about to be launched, Roger. So yeah, I should have been clear on that. The ones that are now being done virtual, the new ones, they're only just about to be launched out. But yeah, absolutely, I'll make sure that communication is picked up. Thank you.
If I can chip in, Chairman, the mixed shed, there was an open meeting a good year ago to which all members were invited. We had about 15 come. Some chose not to carry on with it. They didn't need it, others do. People can drop in and drop out, but it's absolutely open to everybody. So I, through HR, one of their staff organises it. I will ask her to send it out again to all members for the next meeting, which is in August. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Terry.
Thank you, Chairman. You're very welcome to pop around to my shed, but you'll have to tidy it up first. I wanted to ask about Teams and Zoom, because as members at Breckland, we've sort of exclusively been using Zoom for meetings, but Maxine touched upon Teams for staff. So I just wonder if there's a difference there and why that might be, and is there sort of an intention for migration to one platform only, or a mixture of the two. And the other thing I wanted to ask Maxine is around staff and those that use a vehicle quite a lot for their role. Certainly at county level, there's concern amongst the staff around anticipating a certain amount of miles and therefore contribution towards the running costs of the vehicle. If that's not happening for staff, then that's a significant reduction in their income in some cases, and they've taken on commitments to vehicles for that. Is that something that's being picked up at Breckland and we're sort of aware of and looking at how we might be able to support? Might not be an issue for people on higher salaries, but for those on lower salaries, it's a significant drop in income, but they've still got the cost of their car, albeit not the petrol, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxine.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the first question, Terry, around Teams and Zoom, we've had something called Life Size, which we've used through the big video conferencing rooms, which as officers we've used for quite a long time, and I think members have occasionally used it as well. That's something we're still using, but actually Zoom came along and it's very easy to use. It's very fleet of foot, I would say. So actually we have predominantly been using Teams. As part of the rollout, you can remember that the members agreed to roll out Office 365. As part of that rollout, Teams is one of the products that comes with Office 365. So in only the last week, I think I received it on Monday, the Teams element of Office 365 has been issued out to all officers at Breckland. Some are starting to use it. It's another new product. It's very similar to Zoom, but it has a bit of a different functionality. So at the moment, there's no, we're not going to try and migrate everybody onto Teams and say, don't use Zoom. We're kind of saying there's a bit of a mixed economy, really, and we're going to be using all of these tools, I think, for a while longer. And I don't have a favoured version. I haven't really used Teams for long enough to know, but I think that we'll continue to use the mixed economy. I'm sure that members are aware that the committee suite is currently being looked at in terms of the technology that we put in there, and we're going to make sure that all of these different technologies can be used in that environment. In terms of the second part of your question around vehicles, you're absolutely right. We have something called an essential user allowance. That allowance is still going to people, but at the moment they're not doing the miles, so therefore they won't be claiming their mileage. So in terms of our cost base, that's gone down for the council, but obviously officers will still have their cars. We are looking at all of the terms and conditions and the changes as part of Work Smart. We'd already started to have a look at essential user allowance to see what we could do differently, and also there needs to be new incentives around bike to work schemes that we've just introduced. We've had quite a big take up of people ordering bikes through this recent 3 to 4 months. So I think that, yeah, you're absolutely right, it's something for us to look at. We are looking at it already. I don't have a solution for you at the moment, but we're very aware of that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxine. Are you happy, Terry?
Yeah, lovely. I'm reassured that it's on the radar.
Excellent. I haven't seen any other indications, and unless someone waves immediately, I'm going to move us on to the next item. Seeing none, if we could do the operational item, please, Maxine.
Thank you, Chairman. Teresa, can you get the slides up? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the operational recovery, and if we could move on to the next slide, please, Teresa or Julie. So the governance framework, we, as you'd expect, we proactively stood up our strategic gold command as part of our emergency planning protocols before the pandemic really took hold. And that was as part of the response phase. It was in those early stages of response that we recognised the importance of recovery, the recovery phase, and ensuring that it was run in parallel with response. Moving into that more formal recovery phase, which we find ourselves in, still recognising there are absolutely elements of response and normalisation as we continue. We adopted the same structure and that same supporting governance framework, which worked really well for us during the response. As you'd expect, there were iterations. We continue to review the scenario, tweak and adapt our governance framework to make sure we set ourselves up to meet the needs of the organisation and district. It should be noted that we also continue to collaborate with the county-wide resilience forums that Rob mentioned earlier. Moving on to the next bullet point, we delivered an assumption-based operational recovery plan. This was politically and organisationally led, whilst being reflective of place in our district. Recovery is typically a complex and long-running process of rebuilding, restoring, and rehabilitating the economy and community following an emergency, especially of this scale. It's more than just a replacement of what's been lost and rehabilitated. It's also about the regeneration and development and opportunity to build back stronger that we've alluded to earlier. One analogy that we've been using is of a house that's been knocked down, but using those same bricks to build a stronger, better version of that house. What is recovered economically and societally will in all likelihood be very different, as we've alluded to, what's been and what is being replaced and what is in place before the emergency. This is particularly the case when we experience an emergency and pandemic on the scale of COVID-19. The recovery document itself is underpinned by a 5-phase reintroduction of services roadmap, which takes us all the way through to February 2021. And that's aligned with the end of the interim recovery management arrangement that was also alluded to earlier. Now, phase 1 and phase 2, I'm delighted to say that they're complete, some of which we discussed in the performance update and have been alluded to throughout the report. But I should also confirm that along with the adapted guidance changes, that we're always watching the government's guidance as it comes out, and we're trying to be proactive where possible, that it does test our assumptions, and sometimes we do make mistakes. For example, the Environment Protection Team, within their roadmap, we built in some assumptions around the timing to enable us to restart the use of noise recording equipment and water sampling. And unfortunately, those deadlines didn't materialise in the timeframes we had assumed or envisaged, which meant that those 2 elements in particular were moved from phase 2 to phase 3, and phase 3 being July through to August. We also continue to review our concurrent emergency plans. For example, should we be hit by a significant flood or fire event, or indeed, as discussed, a second wave or phase or outbreak of COVID-19, which would see us move back into that response phase. We've documented lessons learned and ensured that we're able to react as quickly as possible. There's still a great deal to deliver across the phases 3, 4 and 5. Like I said, that takes us through to February 2021. And they've all been touched on. For example, the sizable infrastructure projects which have been recommenced, stimulating the economy. And I'll come on to the confidence campaign shortly. The vulnerability programme that we touched on earlier, and the development of the climate emergency strategy. You may have noticed yesterday we announced that we're going to switch to the green energy supplier in October. There's also a host of smaller and some larger efficiency opportunities that will be landing over the following weeks and months. If we can move on to the next slide, please. This is really a distilled version of the phased roadmap, obviously not shown by the phases, but shown by month, again aligning to that February 2021 date. It's probably a bit difficult to see on this slide, but there's various infrastructure projects. The virtual Silver Social program, which kicked off last week or this week, we've already had good feedback, and that's part of that vulnerability program. We're also generating multiple business cases for various funding applications. For example, there's Norfolk Strategic Fund, best part of £6 million that we are bidding for elements of. The DEMS annual canvas has commenced, and obviously we're scoping and shaping a host of strategic proposals. If we can move on to the next phase, please. And finally, but no means least, our confidence campaign, visibly supporting our high streets and hospitality industry by providing advice, street furniture, banners, window stickers, floor markers, hand sanitisation, and making offices readily available to support shoppers and businesses, all to give confidence that they can shop safely and help our businesses back on their feet. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Looking for any members who wish to ask questions. I haven't seen any indications yet. Please wave. Terry, there you are. You start us off then.
It's just a minor point, Chairman, but I can read the roadmap page. It looked quite useful with the information that was on there, so perhaps that could be emailed to us, but fully in support of the presentation, and well done to the team, particularly around confidence, the confidence campaign, but perhaps an email with that slide particularly, which I couldn't read, would be appreciated.
Thanks, Terry. I hope that all of the presentations will be circulated to members of the committee. I've got Linda.
Point of information, if I may, just quickly on that.
Of course.
Apologies, Linda. The Breckland roadmap was Appendix B to the paper that was submitted for decision by the Cabinet on the 1st of June. So all members, it is in the public domain and it is available, as are other supporting slides. And I've been using these with the parishes that I serve as a way of trying to explain where matters are and where we're moving to. Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, Linda.
Thank you, Ian. Linda.
I'll let you off, Ian. I just wanted to raise an issue. I wasn't sure whether to do it under this one or under Max's one, but members were contacted some time ago and asked to volunteer to take over doing the telephone calls for the vulnerable people as officers return to their normal posts. Sadly, not very many did volunteer, but I was one, and we haven't heard anything. So is this still part of the recovery programme to get members to help do that, take some of the stress off the officers, because it helps us keep in touch with all our communities? Thank you.
Maxine, if you wouldn't mind, or Jason.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. I'll respond for this one for Jason. In terms of the members needing to do those calls, as you'll be aware, the requirement for those calls has now died down. So I think what we've done is, and I think hopefully if someone hasn't got in touch with you, they will be getting in touch with you. What we've got is a list of all of those members, along with a list of the volunteers and the various different people who are happy to help, because I'm pretty certain that we are going to need those people to help us at some time. But other things have taken over, is what I'd say, in terms of those initial calls and those shielding calls. But yeah, certainly if your name's on the list, someone will be in contact about what we could get you to help us with going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I haven't got any other indications at the moment, in which case we shall, well, firstly, just before I close the item, are members minded to make any resolutions? You're obviously going to be receiving all of the slides that we've gone through, and you've obviously had the opportunity to ask a lot of questions. Is there anything at the moment you'd like to resolve, or shall we wait until the work programme and we can discuss potentially what future items might flow from our work? Tim. Sorry, Tim, you. Yeah, there you are.
Yep, I think this has come up a few times. The mention of the recovery documents. I really do think that we have to have sight of these recovery documents so that we can form an informed view. So please, can we see the recovery documents?
Absolutely, that's a point that we will put on the work programme then, and we can have a detailed presentation on the recovery documents. Maxine, is that, are you familiar with the recovery documents at the moment? Is that something that you think would be achievable?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the Breckland Roadmap is the recovery document that we are talking about when we're talking about recovery documents. We have got some wider work, but we're waiting at the moment. We're just getting that designed, if you like, for the want of a better word, from our communications team. And as soon as that's done, we can send it out to you. But it's basically just a wider version of what you've already got. But yes, certainly we can send those out to members. There's nothing there that you can't see.
That's excellent. So we'll have the slides sent out to members, we'll have the recovery documents sent out to members. We'll discuss in the work programme what we're going to be looking at next. I'm conscious, of course, we may not be in a recovery phase if there's a second wave beforehand. Hilary, don't worry, I have seen you, I'm not just talking. And so, yes, we'll discuss that in the work programme at item 15. Hilary, go ahead. You're still on mute, Hilary.
Right, sorry about that, Chairman. I think that I will have one thing to bring in to select for review, but I think it's more appropriate to put it under the member issues on the work programme. Okay.
Very good, excellent. I look forward to it. In which case, I thank all of the officers. I know a huge amount of effort went into the preparation of those presentations, and they obviously provided very detailed and fulsome answers to some very detailed and fulsome questioning. So thank you all. Item 12 is outside body feedback. Does anyone want to give any updates? Councillor Wickerson, I have, and I don't think, oh, and Linda, and Robert. So go ahead, David first.
There you go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick one, and excuse me, it is somewhat linked into COVID in some ways. Just to ask or suggest to fellow members that if they are conscious of anybody in their community who is financially unable to supply laptops for their children to continue with their schoolwork during the COVID process, the Hammonds Educational Charity has ring-fenced a quite decent sum of money to be able to assist people in that particular situation. So if you do come across a family which is unable to provide a laptop or broadband access to their children to continue their schoolwork, which is obviously very important at this particular moment of time, then please encourage them to visit the Hammonds Educational Charity website, where there is a very simple application form. And we have set aside a special group of trustees to look at these applications immediately as and when they come in. And hopefully we will be able to assist Breckland students to continue their schoolwork in this very difficult time. So it's Hammonds Educational Charity website. Please, the application form is on there, and hopefully we will be able to respond fairly quickly to provide the necessary help to those families. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think that would be really helpful if you could send that as an email to members.
Yeah, I'll do that
afterwards. But no, that's really helpful. Thank you. And then Linda.
Thank you, Rodri. I just wanted to bring people up to date with the Breckland Older People's Forum. We were due to officially wind up at our AGM back in March because this thing got in the way. We'd been going for 7 years, but we felt all the work we were doing now, because Breckland Council and Norfolk County Council and other bodies were picking up all the issues we'd raised, we'd profiled, we highlighted, there was no need for a separate group. So we haven't had the AGM yet, but we are not in existence now. but we still work under the Norfolk Strategic Partnership for Older People. But I am delighted that the newsletter that was started by Breckland is continuing under the auspices of the Norfolk Strategic Partnership. So none of our work has gone to waste. It's now being absorbed into the vulnerability work and all the other issues that affect older people. And not all members might be aware of that. So I just wanted to update you. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And Robert.
Thank you, Chairman. 3 committees to report on. Norfolk Health Scrutiny are reconstituting, having a virtual meeting on the 30th of July. I do forward to members of the Commission their weekly newsletter, which I've had some feedback that is useful. As regards the Norfolk Museums, Gresson Hall and Time and Tide are reopening next week, and Norwich Castle to follow. There's a virtual meeting of the Museums Committee on the 7th of August. They're doing that using Teams, which I have to say is somewhat more cumbersome than Zoom. And the Norfolk Record Office have had no meetings, but they have reinstated remote search requests so that staff can go into the archive and retrieve information requested, but that is a fee-paying service. So that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. Are there any more for any more? Seeing none. In which case we'll move on to item 13, which is scrutiny call-ins. I'm not aware of any scrutiny call-ins. Apologies, we have some barking dogs. In which case that brings us to item 14, which is councillor call for action. As you know, I've always encouraged people to use this item, and disappointingly, it's fallen to me and Councillor Ashby to be the first people to use it in this tenure of scrutiny. Thank you very much, Teresa, for bringing in Councillors Tyra. Who else have we got? Councillor Ellis and Councillor Grave. I should also flag that we also have Councillors Taylor and Dale, who are councillors both on Attleborough Town Council and, of course, as you know, Breckland members. I'll do a brief introduction on the background. This is an important item for 2 reasons. One, obviously, Councillor Ashby and I don't know why I switched between Councillor Ashby and Tristan. Tristan and I have brought this item because it's of great importance to our local residents, how the town council functions. The town council has a very significant budget that it raises from Attleborough residents, and there are a series of issues that we'll go into today that have been affecting residents and the town council. But it's also a wider point insofar as town councils are unique as authorities. They are covered by a different set of rules compared to district and county councils. One particular peculiarity is that town councils are not subject to the auspices of the local government ombudsman, which means that residents are considerably more restricted in their abilities to get complaints looked at by an independent body. As I have stressed on a number of occasions to my residents, we have no formal powers as a district council over the town council, but we do, as a scrutiny commission, have the ability to scrutinise any matter that pertains to the lives or well-being of our residents. And that's why I have brought this item to you today. No doubt you will all have had experience of your own town and parish councils, and no doubt you'll occasionally have come across problems. I think this is a particularly unusual example, but I hope that it's going to show how the Scrutiny Commission is able to bring to bear some of its questioning powers to shed light where there is currently darkness. In terms of the actual background, I don't know how closely some members have followed what's been going on at Attleborough Town Council. There are a lot of unhappy people in Attleborough around some of the things that have been occurring. In March, there was a parish meeting held with around 200 residents who unanimously in one vote and unanimously with one abstention passed a request for parish polls. One parish poll was asking for the resignation of every councillor on the town council, and the other one was asking for the town council to carry out an investigation into its internal processes. That is something that I have never seen happen before. It was certainly the largest public meeting I've ever seen attended by members of the public, and it went some way to show the depth of feeling in terms of the issues. I'm going to let Tristan briefly give his thoughts, and then I'll have brief thoughts from the 5 town councillors, and then I'll open the floor to questions. Before we do that, this situation is contentious. The town council responded to Teresa's invitation for them to send a representative to this meeting using an external third-party solicitor. It was obviously extraordinary given the cost to the taxpayer for them to use a firm of solicitors to respond to Breckland Council, but it also goes to show quite where relations are in terms of transparency and the ability to facilitate joined up thinking between the 2 councils at the moment. So that's a bit of a backdrop. I will flag that some of the issues that pertain to particular individuals or members should not be discussed. This council meeting should discuss only the issues and not the people, so that we don't fall foul of exempt information under Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act. So with that in mind, I will jump on people if it looks like we're going to stray into territory. Please don't be offended if I do so. It's solely to protect the probity of the process. Tristan, if I could let you just briefly give your views on the councillor call for action, and I'll just ask the members from Town Council to speak as well.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity. What I would briefly say is that the last 9 months have been a massive learning curve for me personally with regards to learning about the accountability and democracy within the parish and town council system. It's extremely regrettable that both you and I have had to take this call for action. Very disappointed that there's no representative from the town hall office in terms of the clerk today, but very grateful for those representatives from the town council who have agreed to attend. I'm very keen to ask questions and to listen and to find out a lot more, because both myself as a district councillor and certainly as a resident have lots and lots of questions to ask, because there's lots and lots of confusion out there within the local community to what is happening. Very, very much despairing comments that I seem to receive now every day from residents who feel like they're hitting their head against a brick wall in terms of trying to get some clarity and some answers as to what is going on. And the recent live streaming of the town council meetings have also been quite an eye-opener for a lot more people within the community. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Tristan. If I could invite first Councillor Tyra, then I'll go to Councillor Grave and Councillor Ellis, just to give just very, very brief overviews in terms of how you feel residents are feeling, whether you've had any issues raised with you around the town council's performance, and any issues you want to bring to the Scrutiny Commission's attention. I'll then, of course, move to Councillor Dale and Councillor Taylor.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, can I thank Rodri for this invite? I'm glad to be here. Unfortunately, it's perhaps not the best conversation to have, but it is a very important issue for the town itself. I'm very happy to answer all questions, any questions you might have about how the town council's been operating. What I would like to say is we do have an investigation committee currently up and running that's looking at how the town council has got in this sorry state of affairs and got into this position, how it happened, what went on, what decisions have been made, what transparency has there been, what's the financial situation, and to try and get to the bottom of this. And I'm sure the truth will come out eventually, and I know that committee is doing a great job. from my point of view, in that I was elected as Deputy Mayor and Vice Chair last May, I think it's fair to say I've not been consulted by the Chair or the Town Clerk on any issues within the Town Council in terms of any advice, thoughts or what have you when it comes to any significant decision. I'm probably as much in the dark as the population of Attleborough and businesses. I don't know what's been going on. I don't know what decisions are being made financially, who's agreed to spend monies on what, on solicitors. I've not been involved in any complaints that I know many people of the public have written into the Town Council because the Chair has point blankly refused to talk to me. So there's been a complete lack of communication. I think there's significant dysfunctionality within the Town Council, and there may be reasons for that, and we'd like to have an open conversation. But from a resident's point of view, there's no transparency, it would seem. There is no communication. There's been many complaints, none of them being acknowledged. A number of FOI questions, quite a lot of FOI questions have been submitted to the Council, as Councillor Ashby and Councillor Oliver know themselves, that have not been responded to, or some very lame answers have been given. So it's a real concern, an ever increasing concern since last May actually, that the Council is not functioning. And I've been involved in local government and central government throughout my 30-year career. I know how it works and what should work and what the responsibilities of both politicians and staff are. And it's certainly not being demonstrated at the moment. Now, that's, you know, it shames me to say that of my own town council, but that is the state of affairs. And, you know, as Tristan said, it has been an eye-opener as to what can go on at a local level with so, it would seem, limited influence unless you've got the majority of members. And that is the problem at the moment. The chair currently has a one-member majority, and one can question why that is and how that's being used. So that's the background from my point of view personally as a member. And also, you know, there is great frustration in the business community, been absolutely fantastic during this crisis, as have members of the public and the community, and basically they've done everything themselves. There's been no involvement, no support from the town council, unlike I know many other towns have done so brilliantly. So we're in a bit of a sad state of affairs. That's it. Happy to answer any questions as openly as I can at this stage. And thank you again for the invite.
Thank you, Eddie. Joe, do you want to say briefly your thoughts?
Much the same as Ed, actually. He's more or less said what I would have said. There's no correspondence is to the public, and even the councillors don't know really what's going on sometimes, right up until the beginning of a meeting. And we get correspondence late and then expect to vote on it. Well, to me, you can't do that. You're not able to digest it when you're in the middle of a meeting.
Thank you.
You know.
Thank you, Joe. And Lucan, do you have anything you want to add to Ed's and Joe's comments?
Hello, good morning, and thank you for the invite, Rodri. Basically, my feelings are very much the same as Joe and Ed. Having only been on the council for a year now, it's been a massive eye-opener. I feel like there's been rumbling issues since for the last year that has steadily got worse as it's progressed, and obviously with the last 9 months really intensified. But I think the worst issue is, again, communication was mentioned, and it's trying to have a conversation within the council about what these issues are and how to address them. I found that we're told that there's problems and issues, but no one wants to say what they are. And obviously the town are reacting to that.
Thank you.
No worries.
Vera, would you like to briefly give your thoughts, and then I'll come to Taylor?
Yes, as a councillor, been a councillor for many years, and I've never known a situation like it. It's absolutely distressing that 15 people that were elected to do the best they can for Attleborough are bickering among themselves. There's two definite sides that's been brought about by an action, and it's only the residents that are suffering. And I'm ashamed, actually, when you go around town and listen to people. And again, it's interpretation of rules and regulations. Somebody who interprets one way, somebody else. And if you've got the key part, then it's your way that goes. And it really is distressing. People want to change. They want the councillors to work for the town, wherever they are. We need to be working for the town, and that's the way forward. After the investigation committee hopefully will sort it out, we will be on the up. And that's my really desperate feeling. We need to improve and move on.
Thank you, Vera. And Taylor.
Yeah, hi, thank you.
We appear to have some technical Taylor difficulties.
I obviously would agree as well. There is serious, oh, can you hear me?
Just about, it's a bit mixed.
Okay. So I just wanted to agree and just to say that there really is a problem within the town at the moment. Many people are aware of it. Obviously, the press coverage has been immense, so is the social media. Regular emails coming in to the town council from various businesses and residents across the town that have grave concerns. A lot of those are the FOIs that have already been mentioned, that do go unanswered, or if answered, it's always the case that it's felt that it's an unsatisfactory answer. Myself, I have an FOI in that hasn't been responded to since the 11th of March without obviously receiving the ongoing correspondence, raising this to us as board members. It's my concern that the problem is greater than any of us know, because if we are not copied into those emails where people are displeased with the service that they're being provided, then that doesn't get passed on to us. So
I'm going to stop you there, Taylor, on the basis that I think we've got the gist.
I fear that it's actually a much greater problem, and I really think that something does need to happen to resolve this.
Thank you, Taylor. Your connection's pretty poor, so we'll let you have a fiddle with that for the time being. So the only other point I'd like to mention before we open the floor to questions is, in terms of the issues that I've been made aware of, the first one was, my understanding is that the very invitation from this committee to the town council for the town council to represent itself was not actually made public to the councillors of the town council. And in fact, the response that was given saying that the town council would not be attending was also not approved by town councillors either, which is unusual. The precipitation of this councillor call for action actually occurred when a full council meeting was cancelled with 2 minutes notice. Councillor Chapman-Allen will be aware of this, as he'd actually been invited to speak at that meeting, and it was cancelled with 2 minutes to go, which actually isn't lawful. It's not possible to cancel a meeting once the agenda's been issued. You would need the council to resolve to adjourn that meeting or end it prematurely. We've got some issues around the amount of money, this has been raised with me by residents, on legal fees. I know the council has incurred tens of thousands of pounds of legal fees at this stage. It's not entirely transparent what these fees have been for, but that, I think, is an issue of significant concern. Another item is that a lot of people now, mainly in light of the difficulties that residents have been finding, have been putting in freedom of information requests. And as you will be aware, all councils, parish through to county, have an obligation to respond to freedom of information requests within 20 working days unless an extension is agreed. These deadlines have consistently not been met. and I include myself as a victim of that particular problem. Obviously, we've got the issues that were alluded to in the parish polls I mentioned earlier. And lastly, we've got an issue whereby the public have often lodged complaints which don't go anywhere. And that in itself is also a failure of process. I'm going to throw it open to the floor. I recognise that you may think, well, what has this got to do with me? But scrutiny should consider the wider ramifications of how town and parish councils function. And if this is allowed to continue, then our residents are going to suffer. I've got David and I've got Roger first, and I'll let David start and I'll look for any other indications.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Most of us, and some of us, have been more aware perhaps of what's been going on in Attleborough for quite some time now, and obviously feel very upset by the whole situation. But can somebody please educate myself as to, as this is a call for quote unquote action, what powers do Breckland have to take action in these type of circumstances? I mean, we're obviously very much aware of what's been going on, but I'm not personally, and I apologise for that, aware of what powers Breckland has to intervene here and what we can actually offer the good people of Attleborough to help solve this problem.
You're absolutely right, David. Another one of the idiosyncrasies of town and parish councils is that Breckland Council has no formal powers to sanction Attleborough Town Council. That said, we have the ability to write letters, we have the ability to represent the views of residents, we have the ability to call people to give evidence, and we have the ability to bring into the public domain items which otherwise aren't properly scrutinised in the current setup. And that is the soft power that I'm hoping this commission is going to bring. Absolutely, we can't do anything formally to make the town council change its approach to certain items, but we can certainly bring attention to bear on it, and we can ask questions why things aren't happening as they should. So you're quite right, there are no formal powers. Roger, and then I've got Linda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, if I may, Chairman, I'm going to make a few comments, and probably Rory Ringer, I'd like him to jump in at any point if he thinks that what I'm saying is not applicable. The first thing I want to say, I'm a parish chairman of 15-year standing now. The job is not easy, but I would say to those town councillors who are having the problems at the moment and feel that they're not getting the information they're entitled to, I believe that there are mechanisms within the operation of the town council that they can use. The first thing I would suggest they do is that they need to go and buy themselves one of these, which is the Yellow Bible for Local Council Administration, written by Charles Arnold Baker. Anybody have any trouble sleeping? I can thoroughly recommend it. But the first thing I want to say is you don't need to rely on the town mayor or chairman to call a town meeting. A town meeting can be called by two councillors, any two councillors, by publishing a notice. And also, if the councillors aren't willing to do that, any 6 parishioners can call a town meeting. And I believe it's under LGA 1972, Schedule 12, paragraph 15, 1D. I don't expect Rory to have that to hand right now, but I believe that that's a mechanism that the town can call a town meeting. If the chair or the other councillors are being obstructive, that is certainly a mechanism you can use. The other thing I just want to say is, in terms of the finances of the council, they should be going through the process at the moment, if they haven't already done so, of having an internal audit carried out. I would like to know, is that internal audit being carried out by an independent person? And if the town council hasn't had a meeting yet to consider that internal audit, certainly councillors will have to consider the contents of that internal audit and can certainly challenge it, because they will, as a council, have to fill in and agree all the AGAR end of year financial records. So I think, again, there's a strong mechanism there where they should, and they are absolutely obliged to check the details of those reports, and they have to read out the statement of governance for those AGAR forms before it goes to external audit. Now, councillors need to be very careful. If you don't agree with anything on there, then is your opportunity to make that case. I'd also say if there's issues where you think that freedom of information requests aren't being handled, you think that you're being denied access to documentation by the town clerk, responsible finance officer, etc., then you always also have the mechanism where you can ask for a put a disciplinary complaint in against the staff, and that has to be handled in accordance with the town council's disciplinary procedures. If you've got a problem with the way that the chairman, stroke mayor, and other councillors, if you feel that they're not treating you in the proper way or treating the public with respect, then certainly they can go down the code of conduct route. The council must have an adopted code of conduct, and that is certainly something, if a complaint is made, that I believe that our democratic services team would get involved in that. That's a monitoring officer issue. I'd also like to know, has NALC been invited to get involved in this? Because I think that they've got a role to play. Certainly, I think there does seem to be a need for mediation from some people who know how to run a town and parish council. And I would say NALC is a good place to start. So, and I don't know whether mediation has been offered, whether that's been accepted by all parties, whether that's something that Breckland officers can feed into, or whether the council feels that they would like to get maybe some experienced members of other councils to come along and offer some advice, and perhaps offer, I would say, impartial scrutiny about what is going on in the town, and probably take some of the heat out of the situation. That's all I've got to say on that, but I thoroughly recommend the Yellow Book. It is a must. There's a lot of good information in there that can help you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger. Incidentally, I know that the parish meeting that was called, what did actually use the power you alluded to in Schedule 12, which was 6 parishioners. I'm going to ask if any of the town councillors present want to comment on your question around the internal audit, and also whether they can comment on mediation. I've seen Eddie. Tyro would like to speak on that. Are there any other councillors who would like to say anything at this time? Seeing none. Eddie, if you want to respond.
I think Councillor Kybird had his hand up with a question, but if I just quickly respond, and again, thanks very much for that, Roger. I must confess there's 1 or 2 councillors that have become absolute experts in understanding how local government works in its administration, not least Taylor, who's probably read that book inside and out 3 times now. But you're quite right, there are mechanisms, and those mechanisms should work. Sadly, they are not. They're being ignored, and if anything, they're being swerved, to say the least. We have tried on numerous occasions to call a meeting. I have done myself. I'm chairing the Atterbury Neighbourhood Plan Committee, and I've asked for meetings. I asked for an EGM following last Monday's debacle and cancellation, and that was ignored. So we do try to follow process. In terms of the internal audit, I think I'll let Taylor explain that if she's willing to do so, because she's had a look at that in a lot of detail. What I will mention, I can't go into too much detail because I'm personally involved, but mediation was offered by the monitoring officer by Breckland very early on in all this saga, and the town council chose to ignore that. So mediation was offered. The town council do not wish to take part in any mediation about anything. That's what is being seen at the moment. So it's a very difficult situation, but you know, I do welcome your comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eddie. I'm going to let Roger come back. I've got Tristan to speak. I've got Robert to speak. And I think I've got Linda to speak as well. Please nod if that's right. Yes. Good. In which case, so Roger, if you come back on this particular point, and then I'll move.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. With regards to the audit, the other option that is available to you is, if you don't think that you're being included in the internal audit, or you've had the opportunity to inspect the internal audit, if that sort of thing's going on, then what you can definitely do, and any parishioner can do, is they can complain to the external auditor to say that you feel that there are financial regularities with the running of the council, and the external auditor will consider carrying out an investigation. Now, the cost of that investigation will be a cost to Attleborough Town Council, which ultimately is a cost to the parishioners, but they can carry out that investigation. And that may be a good route to go, because if the auditors aren't happy, then I certainly think that that gives you a great deal of weight in your criticisms of the Town Council, and it gives you the opportunity to move forward and say, look, we just can't carry on like this. But at least you will have had external experts on the financial level, and the running of the council would have looked at that. I think it's really important, and I suggest that you look that up. Rory may be able to tell you how to do that. If not, I can probably put you in touch with the external auditor and give you all their contact details. But that is certainly something worth doing. Get them how this is being conducted, then they will investigate. I'm pretty sure they will. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. I know, Taylor, you had your hand up as well. So I'm going to go to Tristan next, then Robert, then Linda, then Terry, then Taylor. So Tristan.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question aimed at Ed, that he can hopefully provide some clarity without saying anything he shouldn't with regards to the ongoing investigation. And more importantly, clarity for the public that will be watching this live and retrospectively. Initially, as was contained in the national media and local media, yourself and along with another councillor was stripped of the title of Deputy Mayor. There were numerous press releases and information on the Town Council website with regards to that. Now, the fact that you're back chairing the ANP, which you were also stripped of, suggests that that is no longer in force. But despite scrutinising the Town Council website, I have found no information whatsoever with regards to that decision. Are you able to provide some clarity on that, please?
Well, the only information I can give you, which is all I know, is that legal advice was sought by another solicitor, the current one. So we are racking up a huge amount of money and spending on solicitors' fees. But the council were advised that the decision to remove myself and another councillor from any committees for 2 years, which would mean I would not be mayor and I could not chair the ANP, was unlawful, even though the council were advised before they had the meeting in February that they could not do that. However, they ignored that and carried out with the decision. However, they were told legally that was unlawful, and as such, there was an EGM a couple of weeks ago now, can't remember the exact date, apologies, whereby they reversed the decision. And that's all they've said, they've reversed the decision. I've not seen anything on the council's website, and certainly neither has there been any effort to make any apologies either to the public, let alone to myself and another councillor personally. So I just see it being swept aside. It's not happened. Let's move forward and let's keep quiet.
Thank you. And Tristan, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, thanks for that, Ed. I just would have thought that it would have been suitable and appropriate that there would have been the same amount of fanfare with regards to the decision to take away that post as there was for you to be reinstated, and any apology that would be required.
Well, it would have been nice, you're quite right, but they've chosen not to. So it's very difficult. I'm sure the investigation committee will get to the bottom of this. There are, I believe, reasons why they're taking this stance, but I don't want to discuss that here and now, but it will come out. But you're quite right. There's been nothing to say. You know, I've been put back in my position and back onto the neighbourhood plan. It's all been quiet and through hearsay, unfortunately.
Thank you, Ed. It does seem extremely irregular what occurred. It's not every day that a town council passes a decision and then decides to reverse it so soon afterwards, particularly given the public scrutiny of that. Robert, I think you've got a point to come in on.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, point of information, was the decision not to have mediation a decision of the full council? Secondly, looking at the website, the financial regs are on the website, but I cannot see the standing orders which regulate how the council does its business. And within the financial regs, you can only spend up to the approved budget. So if anyone authorises expenditure over that, they can be personally liable. And the district auditor would be able to surcharge. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Linda.
Thank you, Rodri. Because this is being recorded, I want to make it really clear that I'm speaking as me, Linda, as a past parish councillor, a town councillor, and I am a qualified town clerk, although I've never practiced as one. So my advice is coming from me with those titles, not as chairman of Breckland Council. I'm just amazed. I absolutely support what Roger said. Considering that town and parishes are all on the same tier of government level, the difference in operation between a parish council and a town council is enormous. And especially during this crisis, I know the parish councils have worked absolutely coordinating, working together to get things done for the community, and that several town councils have not been able to produce that. But my overall advice is that, and this is especially for you Attleborough guys, who I have every sympathy with, you are elected as councillors and you make the strategic decisions of that council, whatever that council is. The officers are employed, you are their employers to deliver that service based on, as Roger was saying, all the governance that sits in that lovely yellow book, and I've got it by my bedside. So you need to make sure that all your governance, your financial regs, your standing orders, etc., are what you want them to be and that you have approved. And over the past few months, I've heard from a number of different areas, not just Attleborough, where things have been done that are absolutely disciplinary liable. So with my past experience hat on, I'm more than happy to help you guys with any other advice, keeping it completely separate from Breckland work, obviously. But there are mechanisms there, and we need to ensure that you're given the support, and you do use NALC, use ACAS, use whoever you need to get you guys back on track, so that your vision for Attleborough is absolutely clear. Once you know what your vision is, the journey there is a lot easier. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Linda. Terry.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of points. I think, like most of the people on this call, I've been a town councillor myself for 12 years now. Been chair of finance, chair of personnel, been mayor, lots of different sort of roles and responsibilities. And I've lost votes and I've won votes, but the most important thing is you have to have faith in the process and by the way in which the decisions are reached, because if you do not have faith in the process, then everything else falls down. So it is very concerning to hear about issues to do with the process, because we're in a democracy. If the process is followed and a situation arises and it's democratically undertaken, and even if we don't like it, so be it. That's the way it should be. But there are, it would seem, issues with process. A couple of suggestions really. One is around training. I've always been very passionate as a member of the member development panel at Breckland that our training, which is very good, is equally made available to parish and town councillors. If we have well-informed, suitably trained parish town councillors in Breckland, that's a good thing, and it's a help to Breckland. And I'm not saying that the town councillors of Attleborough haven't had sufficient training, but it would be wise, I think, for us as a district to put together perhaps a package of training, particularly around local government for parish and town councils. I speak as a town councillor myself, would include myself in that. I would welcome training on the rules and responsibilities of town councillors, and that could be a help to those members in Attleborough into what is legally possible and what's not legally possible, and some of the things that we've touched upon. And Breckland should be prepared to pick up the purse for that. We have a member development budget. It's not fully utilised. That would be a good thing. The other thing I'd suggest is perhaps for a later date if things don't improve, but I personally would be, as much as I don't like to see taxpayers' money wasted, if there is evidence of rules and procedures and the law not being applied, we as a district council should be prepared to intervene. And by way of intervention, I mean legally challenging some of these decisions. They're not just residents of Attleborough we're talking about, they are residents of Breckland. And therefore, as the higher authority, Breckland has a role here. Of course, we should try, as you described, soft power in the first instance. But should that not address the issues that are there, I am more than happy to see Breckland intervene and to address this. We want our town councils and our parish councils to be functioning well, and if there is clear evidence that the processes aren't being upheld, we have a moral obligation, albeit not a legal one, to intervene where possible.
Thank you, Terry. And Taylor.
Thank you. I hope that my signal's better now. I just wanted to thank Linda and Terry for their comments that I found quite useful. Going to training, unfortunately, that is something that the town council has lacked. Since the elections last May, there was a basic councillor introduction following the elections, and since then there's been no training at all. A resolution was passed, I think off the top of my head, it was in January, where they would seek training and actually ask Breckland about planning training, because we obviously as a town council make recommendations or raise objections to Breckland District Council as the planning authority, and none of the members have had any training in that regard. Unfortunately, even though it was passed as a resolution, it hasn't been actioned. This isn't the first time that resolutions have gone unactioned in a period of 6 months at least. As far as the mediation went that was just raised, the council did agree outside of the meeting in an informal capacity that mediation would probably be the best course of action. This was after the initial decision in February had already been taken, but nevertheless it was a discussion that we had. That was never progressed. Members asked that a brief and a scope was put together and quotes were obtained, and that would then be brought back to the full council for their consideration, and that never happened. In a meeting, I think it was the June meeting, when minutes from that meeting back in February were being discussed because they'd been deferred, one of our colleagues, Councillor Leslie, actually challenged the minutes, made reference to the mediation, and the town clerk at the time informed members that the town council had failed to uphold that. So that isn't through any fault of the members. I think there is a strong will there that actually, you know, that would have been a good idea, but I think sadly that ship might have sailed now, because it hasn't been something that still to this day has been provided provision on an agenda for us to have a debate on that. And with the external audit, when the audit come around, I did revisit the financial regulations of the council, and I did actually raise, when it was first brought to our attention, that within the financial regulations, it's the council that should appoint the external auditor, and that did not happen. It was appointed, it was all conducted, and then it was brought to us after it was done for acceptance only. So it's a bit of a struggle, and I know there is a clear divide in the council at the moment. That everyone is fully aware of that. It's no secret. And unfortunately, things like that, you can raise questions, but if you can't convince a majority, then there's little power that you hold, unfortunately.
Thank you, Taylor. I haven't seen any other indications at this time. Obviously, this item is not one that we're going to be able to resolve today. It's an ongoing issue, and I think the members present are extremely appreciative of the advice that they've had from Roger and Terry and Linda in particular. If the Commission is so minded, I would like to adjourn this item or resolve that we consider bringing this item back onto the agenda in September. That will give these councillors an opportunity to try and implement some of the advice that we've been able to talk about today. And where the situation hasn't improved, then, as Terry said, I think we do have a moral obligation to do whatever we can to try and achieve resolution that's going to be of benefit to the residents. I don't know, are there any officers who would like to say anything before I move that to a formal resolution? Sarah, I thought I saw you indicate. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to also clarify that NALC have various courses and training courses that they, I'm sure, would be able to assist the Town Council with. And obviously just bear in mind our limited powers. I know it's alluded to that we probably should step in, but we obviously do have very, very limited powers in what we can actually do.
Thank you, Sarah. So would I be able to get a proposer, please, for us to take that course of action? Linda, and a seconder? Hilary, thank you. And can I see all those in favour, please? And can I see any abstentions and any against? So just for clarity, please shout. I didn't see any abstentions or against, but I am scrolling between 3 screens. No one shouting. Okay, so that was passed unanimously then. Thank you very much. Well, Tristan and I really appreciate you allowing us to bring this to the Scrutiny Committee. Well, I say allowing us, it was me who allowed it to myself, which is sort of unfair. But for you allowing us to talk about it in such detail, I really appreciate that. And hopefully we're going to have better news in September. With that then, I will move us on to the work programme item at item 15. Oh, sorry, Taylor, did you have something you wanted to say before I move off this item? I have a message to say that you do.
I would just like to say thank you for inviting us and giving us the opportunity to speak, and for the advice given.
And a particular thanks, of course, to Eddie, Joe and Lucan, because they had to wait for 2.5 hours before they were able to speak. So I'm sorry about the slippage in our timings, but we are a very thorough committee over here. So thank you very much. Item 15 then. So I know Hilary and Tim both had, oh, and Terry. So 3 people all had points they wanted to make on the committee. If I might venture, one of the things I would like for us to consider at the next meeting is an update on the commercial portfolio. As Ralph said, it's a lagging indicator, and we're probably only just now hitting the situation that's going to affect the council finances. So I think if we're able to get particularly a detailed report, we could potentially go below the line to consider some of the more granular information that's available to us as a council. That would be one of my suggestions. But anyway, I'll go to Hilary first, then Tim, then Terry, and then and then Linda. I can see you struggling.
I got there.
There you are. You're the...
Yes, it kept telling me it wouldn't do it. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I'd like to bring in the possibility of having all the housing associations come to our meeting. This has been highlighted particularly during the recent COVID crisis. There's several points that I think it would bring value to. First of all, it's the vetting of prospective tenants. It's better communication between association and tenants. Where there's changes on tenancy agreements, that should be in writing, and if necessary, new agreements made. Tenant support. At the moment, if you've got a problem, you can end up, God, how many telephone numbers to ring? It would be ideal if all tenants had a one-stop telephone number. We have to remember a lot of them are either have problems or they are older. And to start going round and round and round in circles is not very good. So a one-stop telephone number would be excellent. Also response times for problems and repairs, and keeping the tenants informed. The above points also need to cover people who are on a buy-rent situation, because don't know if their rights are exactly the same as a total tenant. So with those questions in mind, I would like at some point in the future for us to bring on all housing associations.
Thank you, Hilary. I know it's one of Linda's special subjects, housing associations. So, and we had already dreamed of doing another bit of work on housing associations before the pandemic happened. So I'm sure we can get that included in the work programme if Julie and Teresa are able to make a note of that when we finish up here today. Tim, I think you were next.
Thank you, Chairman. I think you were going to take over part of this. One of the things that I was asking for was the asset-by-asset assessment and the commercial side of things, and I think you wanted to pick up on that. But again, to reinforce the recovery documents, and I think once we've seen those recovery documents in detail, we perhaps need to actually have a proper full discussion of the Commission so that we can actually analyse what's going on and how we're going to take this forward.
Absolutely. I think we shall add a recovery plan to the next agenda. I reserve the right to ask you guys to delay it if it turns out we're not in a recovery phase, but back in a firefighting phase. But hopefully, all being well, we will be able to do recovery in September rather than second wave discussions, if that's all right, Tim. Great. And then Terry.
Thank you, Chairman. Just two suggestions, really. I note on the items to be scheduled, we're having sort of a planning theme there with the executive member for planning, application validation, that sort of thing. I wonder if we can include with that something around enforcement. I'd be intrigued to know how enforcement's been affected over the past 6 months with COVID and how that's sort of faring moving forward. A couple of members have suggested that. And then also just picking up the discussion earlier, I think a report or presentation about the Council's approach to local procurement and what we might want to be able to do to promote that further would be really useful.
Brilliant, thank you. So just to recap then, and please do indicate if anyone else, oh sorry, Linda, you go, and then I'll do a little sum up.
Thank you, Chairman. It may be sensible to put this in with the whole report about the recovery and moving forward with COVID-19, but I would like through the Cabinet Member for Customer Engagement to be that on our work schedule. During these last few months, we've had, well, I've had, and several of us have had, particular issues with communications. So we need to look at, is our communications team resourced enough? The fact that when I look at social media, other councils and bodies seem to have a much more upbeat and engaging way with the public than we do currently. So I'm not knocking any personalities. It's the system and the process, please, to look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I don't have anyone else indicating, so just to sum up, and please someone shout if I've missed anything, but for, oh, Ian first.
Apologies, Mr. Chairman, just quickly. Just scanning through the, given I was one of the originators of the planning options and issues, can I suggest a couple of changes so as to streamline things? There's the review of the capita contract, which I gather is probably a regular annual thing anyway, but it's particularly important, I think, coming after COVID and seeing whether or not any changes or anything needs to be considered on that front. I have had separate meetings with Simon Wood on understanding the process for revising the local list and the planning application validation. And it's been fully explained. I may not be fully satisfied, but it would actually probably be wasting the Commission's time to be working on that, and likewise the neighbourhood planning bit. But what I would like to add, because we did have it previously, is an update from the planning side on the 5-year land supply, where we are at the moment and where the council is planning to be for the 1st of November, which is when we technically lose the assumed 5-year land supply under the local plan. And that, I think, is becoming potentially becoming present.
Thank you very much, Ian. I think given house building's been slowed somewhat, that may be very interesting. And Fabian, I think you have a point.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to raise, I think because it's there is that chance that the government may introduce more grant funding for district councils to help businesses. I'd like to see the grant level just questioned again, but on a positive note, not so a heavy screw, but to get what we got right, and to actually make sure it's fully aware where we did slip up and get those right, just on the allocation of funds and everything. So we are moving forward if it does repeat it in a similar scale or on some form or another. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so just to sum up then, for the next agenda item and probably the agenda item after, because we have rather a lot from that, all good stuff. We've got the councillor call for action, which will continue in September. We've got the commercial property review, which I proposed to take in September, along with the granular data that Tim mentioned. We've also got the recovery plan, which may or may not come in September, depending on how things go, but I hope that the recovery plan documents will be circulated after this meeting in any event. We've got housing associations to come at some point. I think potentially the meeting after September, given the amount of stuff we're going to have going on. We've got communications, local procurement, planning and enforcement, capita contract review, update on 5-year land supply as the other 5 items that have been suggested today. If the committee is happy, I will take those away. We will circulate a draft agenda in advance of us looking to formalise that agenda to members of the committee. And if you're happy, we'll proceed with that, or we can tweak it as you see fit. Are members satisfied with that? Is there anyone who wants to make a point? Excellent, thank you very much. In which case, sorry, go ahead. Anyone speak there? Sorry, I thought I heard someone. In which case, it leaves me great pleasure to say that we're moving to the last item on the agenda, which is the date of the next meeting, which I propose to keep as published on the agenda. And with that, I close the meeting. Thank you very much all for your attendance, and thank you for those watching at home.